The muzzle flash came from 300 meters up the ridge, and the man behind it did not hurry. He watched Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cole through his scope for a full 4 seconds, watched him breathe, watched him settle, and then he took the shot that put America's best sniper face down in Afghan dirt. Then he keyed his radio and laughed. He told his men the eye of the Americans was blind now. He told them to walk down the mountain and finish it. And 40 meters below, a 25-year-old supply clerk who had never fired a shot in combat looked at that fallen rifle in the dust. Before we go on, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end of this one, because the last 5 minutes will not leave you the same. And drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far Emily's story travels tonight. Now let me take you back to the beginning. For most of her military career, Emily Carter was invisible. And the strange part was that she had made peace with it. She was 25 years old, an Army logistics specialist assigned to Forward Operating Base Ryder in eastern Afghanistan, and her whole world was a warehouse. Not a battlefield, not a gun truck, a warehouse. Concrete floor, corrugated roof, a Connex box that ran too hot in the afternoon, and rows of green metal cans stacked in patterns only she fully understood. Every morning, Emily counted bullets. Every night, she checked the numbers again. Nobody wrote articles about that. Nobody called home and said, "Mom, guess what my daughter did today?" She reconciled a discrepancy of 400 rounds of 5.56 between the range log and the ammo point ledger. Nobody threw a parade for accuracy, but her commanders trusted her, and they trusted her for one reason. In 18 months on that base, Specialist Emily Carter had never once been wrong, not once. If a convoy needed ammunition at 0400, it was staged and sealed at 0330. If a medic screamed over the radio that he was out of tourniquets, Emily had already pulled a case already logged. It already had it moving. She had a memory like a filing cabinet and hands that never shook. And the only thing she ever heard about it was silence, because in the Army, doing your job right sounds exactly like nothing happening at all. The first time anybody said her name out loud that summer, it wasn't a compliment. Carter. She looked up from the clipboard. First Lieutenant Brady Kessler was standing in the warehouse doorway with his hands on his hips, and Emily already knew what kind of morning it was going to be. "Sir, where's my ammo?" "Second platoon's basic load is staged on pallet 3, sir. It's been ready since 2200 last night." "That's not what I asked. I asked, where's my ammo?" Emily set the clipboard down slowly. "It's 40 feet behind you, sir. Signed and sealed." Kessler didn't turn around to look. He never did. That was the thing about Kessler. He didn't want the answer. He wanted the moment. "You know what your problem is, Carter?" "No, sir." "You think this is a library?" He walked in boots, loud on the concrete, and he tapped one of the crates with 2 knuckles like he was checking a melon. "You think this is about paperwork? There's men out there getting shot at, and you're in here alphabetizing." Emily didn't answer. She had learned that with Kessler, an answer was fuel. "Nothing," he said. "No comeback?" "No, sir." "Right." He smiled the way a man smiles when he thinks he's won something. "That's why you're in here." He walked out. Emily stood there for about 10 seconds, and then she picked up her clipboard and went back to work, because there were 9,000 rounds that needed to be verified before noon, and Kessler's opinion did not change the count. Sergeant Marcus Doyle came out from behind the shelving about a minute later. He was 38, a career supply sergeant with a bad knee and a worse attitude, and he had been listening to the whole thing. "You gonna let him talk to you like that? He's a lieutenant. He's a kid with a bar on his chest who got here in March." Doyle spat into an empty water bottle. "You've been on this ground longer than he has." "Doesn't matter, Sergeant." "It matters to me." He watched her a second. "Why don't you ever fight back?" Emily made a mark on the sheet. "Because if I fight back, he wins." Doyle thought about that. "That's either the smartest thing I ever heard or the saddest." "It's both," Emily said. And that was Emily Carter at 25. Not broken, not angry, just folded up small in a place where being small had always felt safest. To understand why, you have to go back to a gravel driveway in Montrose County, Colorado, and a man named Ray Carter. Emily's father had been a Marine. 10 years, 2 deployments, and honorable discharge, And then 11 months after he took the uniform off for the last time, a jack slipped under a truck in his own garage and took his left leg below the knee. He didn't lose it in a firefight. He lost it in his driveway on a Tuesday, and Emily always believed that was the part that hurt him worst. There was no story in it, no glory, just a bad Tuesday. Emily was 9 when it happened. She remembered the sound. She remembered the neighbor running. She remembered her father gray-faced on the concrete looking up at her and saying in a voice that was almost calm, "Em, go get the phone. Don't run. You'll fall. Don't run. You'll fall." That was her father in 5 words. The whole man. Ray Carter healed and got fitted and learned to walk again, and he never once complained about it in front of his daughter. But something in the house changed. He got quieter. He worked on other people's trucks in that same garage for the next 15 years, and every so often Emily would hear him talking to himself out there. Not sad, just talking. When she was 17 and told him she was enlisting, he didn't cheer and he didn't argue. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her for a long time. "What job?" "Logistics." He nodded slowly. "Good. You are not going to say anything else. What do you want me to say?" Emily's throat tightened, and she said the things she had been holding for weeks. "Everybody says I'm too quiet, too careful, too ordinary. Kids at school say I'm the girl who never does anything." Her father set the rag down. "Come here." She came. "You see this leg?" He knocked on the prosthetic with one knuckle, and it made a hollow sound she had heard 1,000 times. "You know what took it? Not a war. A jack stand and about 4 seconds of me being in a hurry." "Dad, let me finish." He looked at her hard. "Being useful doesn't always mean being the person holding the weapon. Sometimes it means making sure the person holding it has what they need. And listen to me, because I'm only going to say this once. There are 2 kinds of people who never get thanked. The ones who never did anything, and the ones who did everything right so nothing ever went wrong." Emily stared at him. "You're going to be the second one," he said, "and it's going to feel exactly like being the first one. Every single day. That's the price." 8 years later in a hot warehouse, 11,000 kilometers from that garage, Emily Carter was still paying it. She believed that was her purpose. She believed it right up until a 51-year-old man with a gray flat top and a knee brace looked at a paper target and asked her a question that took her whole life apart. Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore had no business being at FOB Ryder. He was a retired sniper instructor 26 years in, brought back on a contract to run marksmanship refresher training for support personnel because somebody at brigade had noticed that cooks and mechanics and clerks were getting into firefights at the same rate as infantry and shooting like they had never seen a rifle before. Whitmore hated the assignment. He said so out loud on day 1 to a group of 40 exhausted soldiers standing on a dirt range at 104 degrees. "I want to be honest with you people," he said. "I did not come out of retirement for this." Somebody laughed nervously. "I'm not joking." Whitmore walked the line slowly. "I spent 26 years teaching men to do one thing and I was good at it, and now I'm here teaching you how to not shoot yourself in the foot. So you're going to forgive me if my enthusiasm is limited." Doyle muttered, "Feels great being wanted." "You said something, Sergeant." "Said I'm honored, Master Sergeant." "Uh-huh." Emily was standing at the end of the line. She had signed up for the voluntary session for one reason, and it wasn't glory. Her qualification had lapsed. It was on her record, and Emily Carter did not let things sit wrong on her record. Whitmore got to her, looked at her name tape, looked at her, and moved on without a word. "Demo." That was the first thing. He didn't even bother. They shot at 50 meters first, then 100. Standard stuff, unsupported prone iron sights on borrowed M4s, and it went about how you would expect. Rounds all over the target. One kid missed the paper entirely and hit the berm. Whitmore watched it with the expression of a man watching his own funeral. Then they got to Emily's lane. She lay down. She wasn't fast about it. That was the first thing Whitmore noticed, though he didn't say anything. Everybody else dropped into prone like they were diving into a pool. Emily got down like she was setting a piece of furniture in a room. She adjusted her elbows. She moved her left leg 2 inches. She settled the buttstock into her shoulder, then took it out and did it again, slightly different. "Some time today," Carter Kessler called from behind the line. Emily didn't respond. Sir, Whitmore said without looking back. Do not talk on my range. Kessler blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. There was a silence you could have poured concrete into. Emily fired. Whitmore watched the first round go, and his eyes changed. Nothing dramatic, just a flicker. She fired again, and again. 5 rounds total. And here's the thing that gave it away, the thing nobody else on that line understood. She took the same amount of time between every single shot. Not fast, not slow, the same, like a metronome, like a woman counting something. When the range went cold, Whitmore walked down range himself. He didn't send anybody. He walked down there in the heat with his bad knee, and he stood in front of Emily's target for a long time. Then he pulled it off the frame and carried it back. He didn't say anything to Emily. He held the target up in front of the whole line. Who wants to tell me what this is? Nobody spoke. Sergeant Doyle, you've been in 20 years. What is this? Doyle squinted. That's 1 hole, Master Sergeant. That's 5 holes, Whitmore said. 5, at 100 meters, with iron sights, with a rifle that has been abused by 600 people and cleaned by 4. He turned the target around and looked at it again, and then he looked at Emily and his voice dropped. Who taught you that, nobody, Master Sergeant? Don't lie to me. I'm not lying, Master Sergeant. Your father was a shooter. My father was a Marine. He never took me hunting. He said he didn't like the sound anymore. Whitmore stared at her. Then where did this come from? And Emily said the thing that would follow her for the rest of her life, and she said it in the most matter-of-fact voice you have ever heard, like she was reading a serial number. I just did what you said, Master Sergeant. The line went dead quiet. What I said, oh, Whitmore repeated. You said breathe out and hold at the natural pause. You said don't fight the reticle, let it settle. You said the trigger should surprise you. Emily shrugged. So I did that. Whitmore lowered the target. Everybody here got the same instructions, he said quietly. Everybody. Yes, Master Sergeant. And you're the only one who actually did them. Kessler laughed from the back. It was one of those laughs designed to be heard. Come on, that's a fluke. She got lucky. Whitmore turned around slowly. Lieutenant, do you want to shoot? The whole line felt it. 40 soldiers all at once sensing the exact moment a day turns into a story. Kessler smiled. Not really necessary, Master Sergeant. I disagree. I think it's very necessary. I think a fluke is a beautiful thing to test. 5 rounds, 100 meters. Same rifle. I don't have to prove anything to you. No, sir, you don't. Whitmore held out the M4. But you just said that soldier got lucky in front of her in front of 40 people. So now you're proving something to them. Emily wanted to disappear. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to say something to defuse it to be small. That was the muscle her whole life had built. Fold up, take the hit, move on. She didn't say a word. Kessler took the rifle. He shot 5 rounds. He shot them fast because fast looks confident, and confidence was the only thing Brady Kessler had ever been good at. Whitmore didn't walk down range this time. He just looked through his spotting scope for about 2 seconds. 4 on paper, he said. 6-inch spread, 1 in the dirt. Kessler handed the rifle back. His jaw was tight. Wind. There's no wind, sir. There's always wind. Not today. Whitmore said it kindly, almost gently, which somehow made it worse. Not on my range, sir. Kessler walked off. He didn't say anything else. And Sergeant Doyle would later say to anybody who would listen that he watched Brady Kessler decide right then and there in that exact moment that he was going to make Emily Carter's life miserable. And that decision had nothing to do with Emily at all. After the line broke, Emily was policing brass when Whitmore's shadow fell across her. Carter, Master Sergeant, sit down. I'm on brass detail. Carter, his voice didn't rise. Sit down. She sat on an ammo can. He sat on one across from her, slowly favoring the knee. He set the target on the ground between them. Do you know what you did today? I shot 5 rounds, Master Sergeant. No, yeah. He tapped the paper. You shot 1 round 5 times. You understand the difference? She didn't. Most people shoot 5 rounds and get 5 stories. Different grip, different breath, different everything. They're improvising every single time and they don't even know it. He looked up at her. You did the exact same thing 5 times in a row. That's not luck. Luck can't repeat. Emily looked at the target. It's just following instructions, she said. Right. Whitmore laughed once without humor. Just following instructions. Carter, I taught for 26 years. You want to know how many people can actually follow instructions under heat, under fatigue with a lieutenant yelling at them? She waited. Almost nobody, he said. It's the rarest thing in the world. Emily shifted on the can. Master Sergeant, I count ammunition for a living. I know. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. I know that too. So I don't understand why we're having this conversation. And Whitmore leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and asked her the question. You know what your problem is, Carter? Emily's stomach dropped. She had heard that exact sentence 6 hours earlier from Brady Kessler. No, Master Sergeant, she said, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Whitmore pointed at the target. You think you're just the person carrying the ammunition. Emily didn't move. But your hands, he said, were made for something else. She sat there for a second, and then she did something she had not done in front of another soldier in 18 months. She laughed. It came out wrong, brittle, and fast. That's not, Master Sergeant. Respectfully, that's not how it works. How does it work? People like me don't get to be people like that. Whitmore's eyebrows went up. People like you. Quiet people. Careful people. Ordinary people. She was talking faster now, and she couldn't stop it. My whole life, everybody's told me the same thing. I'm the one who's good at not messing up. That's not a talent, that's the absence of a problem. You don't build anything out of that. Who told you that? Everybody. Name one. Emily opened her mouth, and nothing came out because the honest answer was standing in a garage in Colorado with a hollow leg, and she was not about to say it to a stranger. Whitmore watched her face, and being who he was, he read the whole thing anyway. He didn't push. He stood up, picked up the target, and folded it once. I'm keeping this, he said. Why? Because in about 6 months you're going to tell me it never happened, and I'm going to need proof. He started walking away, and then he stopped. Carter, Master Sergeant, come back tomorrow, after your shift. Range will be called and empty. Bring nothing but yourself. Master Sergeant, I have a full... That wasn't a question, he said, and kept walking. Emily stood in that empty range for a long time with her hands full of brass. She did not go the next day. That's the part people leave out when they tell this story. They want the montage. They want the girl to hear the speech and run toward destiny with the music swelling. That's not what happened. Emily Carter went back to the warehouse, worked a 14-hour shift, and went to bed. And she told herself the whole time that a 51-year-old contractor with a bad knee had been bored and looking for something to do. She didn't go the day after that either. On the third day, Whitmore walked into her warehouse. Doyle saw him first and said, uh-oh. Whitmore didn't say anything about the range. He looked around at the shelving, at the crates, at the color-coded tags, at the ledger open on the desk, with a line of numbers and handwriting so clean it looked printed. Who does this? He asked. Doyle jerked a thumb. She does. Whitmore turned a page, then another. He looked at a column of figures for maybe 30 seconds. This is a year of tracking here, he said. Every lot number, every serial. 18 months, Emily said from behind him. Any discrepancies? No, Master Sergeant. None. None. He closed the ledger. Do you know, he said quietly, that the entire discipline of long-range shooting is a bookkeeping problem? Emily blinked. What? That's all it is. That's the secret. Everybody thinks it's about being a killer. It's not. It's data. He tapped the ledger. It's temperature and pressure and humidity and lot variation and barrel wear and how many rounds through the tube and what the round did last time in these exact conditions. It's a ledger, Carter, and you keep the cleanest ledger I have ever seen in 26 years. Emily stared at him. Come to the range, he said. Master Sergeant, 1 hour. If you hate it, I'll never speak to you again. You have my word, and I'm a man who keeps it. Doyle from behind a shelf said, Go, Carter. Stay out of it, Sergeant. Nope. Emily looked at the ledger, then at Whitmore. 1 hour, she said. That night, she stayed for 4. They didn't shoot for the first 90 minutes. That surprised her more than anything. Whitmore made her lie down in the dirt with an unloaded rifle and breathe. That's it. That's it. For an hour, you got somewhere to be. Master Sergeant, I've got 900 rounds of 40 millimeter that need. Breathe, Carter. So she breathed. And here's what nobody tells you. Somewhere in the second hour, lying on her stomach in the dark on a dirt berm in eastern Afghanistan, with an empty rifle and a 51-year-old man saying almost nothing, Emily Carter felt something she had never felt in her entire life. Quiet. Not the quiet of being ignored. Not the quiet of folding up small so nobody notices you. A different one. The quiet of being exactly the right size for the thing in front of you. She didn't have a word for it. She just knew that when Whitmore finally said, "That's enough for tonight," her first reaction was disappointment, and that scared her more than the lieutenant ever had. She sat up and brushed the dirt off her chest. "Master Sergeant, can I ask you something?" "Go." "Why me?" Whitmore was quiet for a second. "You want the nice answer or the real one?" "The real one." "Because I watched you take an insult from an officer and not flinch." He looked at her. Everybody else on that line was performing, Carter. Every single one of them. They were shooting to be seen. You were shooting to be correct. Do you understand how rare that is? "That's not a virtue," Emily said. "That's just being invisible." "Is it?" Whitmore stood up slowly. "Carter, a sniper is a man or a woman who has to be perfectly still, perfectly patient, perfectly unnoticed, and perfectly correct for hours with no audience, no applause, and no one to tell them they did well. You've been doing that in a warehouse for 18 months. Emily didn't answer. "You've been in training your whole life," he said. "You just didn't know what for." She went back to her bunk that night and did not sleep. The next 8 weeks were the strangest of Emily Carter's life because on paper nothing changed at all. She counted bullets, she checked numbers, she signed for pallets. Kessler kept coming into her warehouse and doing his little routine, and she kept taking it, and Doyle kept getting angrier about it than she did. And every night when the base went quiet and the generators hummed and everybody else was watching movies on a laptop or calling home, Emily Carter walked out to a dirt berm on the edge of a combat outpost and did the same 5 things over and over until they stopped being 5 things and became one thing. Position, breath, sight, press, follow through. She did it 10,000 times. Whitmore was not a warm teacher. That's important to understand. He didn't do encouragement. What he did was worse. Again. Master Sergeant, that was again. That was a good group. It was a lucky group. Your left elbow moved between round 2 and 3. Do it again. How could you possibly see my elbow from over there? Again. And here's the thing, it should have broken her. That kind of relentlessness breaks most people in a week. But Emily Carter had spent 18 months being told by everyone around her that her work didn't matter, and now here was a man who thought her work mattered so much that he was willing to be cruel about it. For the first time in her life, somebody was demanding something from her. She would have walked through fire for it. About 6 weeks in on a night with no moon, Whitmore laid a case on the ground and opened it. Emily looked at what was inside and her mouth went dry. "That's not an M4. "No, it is not." "Master Sergeant, that's a, sit down. I'm not qualified to touch that." "Carter." He looked at her over the top of the case. "Sit down." She sat. He didn't hand it to her. He talked for 40 minutes first. He talked about the round, about how it behaved at 300 meters versus 600, versus 8, about how it slowed, about how it drifted, about how gravity and rotation and air itself conspired against the bullet from the second it left the barrel. He talked about mils and minutes and how a mistake of 1/10 of a unit at 600 meters was the difference between a hit and a story your team tells at your funeral. Emily listened to all of it. Then she said, "So it's a ledger." Whitmore stopped. And for the first and only time in 8 weeks, Emily saw Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore smile. "Yeah," he said, "it's a ledger." He handed her the rifle. The first time Emily Carter looked through a real scope at a target 600 meters away, her hands started shaking so badly she had to set the rifle down. "Master Sergeant, I can't." "Why not?" "Because it's not paper anymore." Whitmore went very still. "Say that again." "At 100 meters with iron sights, it's paper," Emily said, and her voice cracked in a way that horrified her. "It's a math problem. It's a number in a ledger, but through that," she pointed at the scope, "through that it's not paper anymore. It's close. It's right here. She looked up at him and her eyes were wet. I can see the wind moving the grass, she said. 600 meters away. I can see it. Whitmore crouched down beside her. Yeah, he said, you can. I don't want that. I know. I don't want to see things that clearly. I know, Carter. And he said the next part very carefully. That's exactly why I'm teaching you and not somebody who does. Emily wiped her face with the back of her wrist, furious at herself. Master Sergeant, permission to say something. Say it. I count ammunition. That's it. That's the whole thing. I'm good at it, and it matters, and I'm not ashamed of it. Her voice was shaking now. My dad lost his leg in a driveway. Not in a war, in a driveway. And he taught me that being useful doesn't mean being the person holding the weapon. It means making sure the person holding it has what they need. That's what I've built my entire life on. Whitmore listened to all of it without moving. Then he said, your father's right. Emily stopped. He's completely right, Whitmore said. And Carter, I need you to hear the next part because it's the only thing I've got to give you. He picked up a round off the ground and held it between two fingers. Someday somebody is going to need what they need, he said, and there's not going to be anybody there to hand it to them. And on that day, being the person who makes sure they have it means being the person who picks it up. Emily looked at the round in his hand. That's the same job, Whitmore said. It has always been the same job. You just don't like where it leads. She didn't shoot again that night. She couldn't. She walked back to her bunk and she sat on the edge of it in the dark for 2 hours. And she thought about her father's voice saying, don't run, you'll fall. And she thought about a warehouse full of green cans she had personally counted 11,000 times. And she thought about the way the grass moved at 600 meters. And then she got up at 4 a.m. and went to work, and nobody on that base had the faintest idea that anything had happened at all. That's how it went, week after week. 2 lives stacked on top of each other, and the seam between them so clean that not one single person noticed. Until Kessler noticed. He caught her coming back from the range at 11:40 at night with dirt on the front of her uniform. Carter, she stopped. Where you been? Range, sir. He looked at her for a long moment. The range is closed. Yes, sir. Then how were you at the range? Master Sergeant Whitmore is running additional instructions, sir. Kessler smiled. It was not a nice smile. Is he now? Yes, sir. For clerks. Emily said nothing. You know what I think? Kessler stepped closer. I think that old man's bored. I think he's out here playing pretend because nobody's needed him in 15 years and he found himself a project. And I think you're eating it up because for the first time in your life, somebody's telling you you're special. Emily's jaw tightened and Kessler saw it and he lit up like Christmas. Oh, he said softly, there it is. Sir, if that's all. That's not all. His voice dropped. Let me tell you something, specialist. There's a reason you're in that warehouse. It's not a punishment. It's a match. The Army looked at you and it saw exactly what you are and it put you exactly where you belong. And no amount of playing G.I. Joe in the dark with a washed-up instructor is going to change what you are. And Emily Carter, who had folded up small for 25 years, who had taken every insult from this man for 4 months without a word, looked Brady Kessler in the eye. Sir, she said, what am I? Kessler blinked. You said you know what I am, so say it. Watch your tone. I'm not raising my voice, sir. I'm asking a question. You've been coming into my warehouse for 4 months to tell me what I am. So tell me, I'd like to write it down. She held up her clipboard. I keep good records. There was a silence. Doyle, 20 feet away, pretending to inventory a shelf, would later swear he stopped, breathing. Kessler's face went red. You're an ammo handler. Yes, sir, I am. That's what you are. Yes, sir. Emily didn't move. Anything else? And that was it. That was the whole rebellion. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't threaten. She just refused for 4 seconds to be smaller than she was. Kessler walked away. Doyle came around the shelf grinning like a fool. Carter, don't. Carter, that was the greatest thing I have ever seen in 20 years of a sergeant. Don't. Emily's hands were trembling on the clipboard. Please don't. Doyle's grin faded. Hey, look at me. You okay? He's going to make me pay for that. Probably, Doyle admitted. Emily nodded slowly. Then it was worth it. 2 weeks later, the operation order came down. Emily heard about it the way she heard about everything, which was before almost anybody else, because the first sign of any mission on any base in any war is somebody asking supply for things. And somebody was asking for a lot of things. She read the request twice. Then she stood up and walked to the operations center, which was not something specialists did. Whitmore was already there. So was Kessler. So was a Navy lieutenant she had never seen before, a man with a beard and tired eyes, in the particular stillness of somebody who has stopped being impressed by anything. His name was Jack Reynolds. Specialist, Reynolds said without turning around. You lost. Sir, this request came through my ammo point. Yes, it did. It's wrong. The room changed temperature. Kessler said, Carter, get out. Sir, it's wrong, Emily said, and she laid the paper on the table. You're asking for a basic load based on a 72-hour window, but you've requested cold weather batteries in a resupply bundle configuration that only makes sense above 3,200 meters. If you're going that high, your 72-hour estimate is off by at least 40% because you're going to burn through. Carter, Kessler's voice was ice. Get out of my TOC, because you're going to burn through more ammunition than you planned, Emily finished, and you're going to do it in a place where nobody can reach you. Silence. Lieutenant Jack Reynolds turned around and looked at her for the first time. Say the number again, he said. Sir, the percentage. Say it again. 40%, sir. Minimum. It's probably worse. I've tracked every resupply out of this base for 18 months. Every single one of them into that valley came back short. Reynolds looked at the paper, then at her name tape, then at Whitmore, who had not said a single word this entire time and was watching all of it with an expression Emily could not read. Whitmore, Reynolds said, You know this soldier? I do. She right? She's never been wrong, Whitmore said. Not once, in 18 months. Reynolds tapped the table twice with 2 fingers. Fix it, he said to Emily. Sir, the request, fix it, bring it back to me in an hour. Kessler said, Sir, with respect, she's the only person in this room who read it, Reynolds said, and he walked out. Emily fixed it in 40 minutes. She brought it back and Reynolds read it standing up, and then he did something that made her heart stop. He said, Who's running your ammo point on this? Sir, it's on the operation. Who's coming? Emily's mouth opened. Sir, we don't normally support elements. Don't normally. I'm not asking about normally. I'm asking who's coming. Whitmore from the corner said one word, her. Emily turned so fast her neck hurt. Master Sergeant, sir, Whitmore said, ignoring her completely, you're going into a valley with a small element, no reliable resupply, and a plan that just got corrected by a specialist because nobody else caught it. You want the person who caught it standing next to you or 400 kilometers away on a radio? Reynolds looked at Emily. Well, and Emily Carter stood in that room with her whole life pulling in 2 directions, and she heard her father's voice, and it did not say what she expected it to say. It said, sometimes it means making sure the person holding it has what they need. I'll go, sir, she said. Kessler laughed out loud. Oh, this is a joke. Reynolds turned to him with the flat, unhurried patience of a man who had done 12 deployments. Lieutenant, he said, do you have something? Sir, she's a clerk. She's never left the wire on a real op. You're taking a supply specialist on Iron Shadow. I'm taking a logistician, Reynolds said, on an operation that will live or die on logistics. What are you taking, Lieutenant? Kessler had nothing. Reynolds looked back at Emily. 72 hours. Be at the pad at 0300. Bring nothing you can't carry uphill. He left. The room emptied, and then it was just Emily and Whitmore, and Emily turned on him with a fury that shocked them both. What did you just do? I answered a question. You volunteered me. You volunteered yourself. I just made sure the door was open. Master Sergeant, Emily's voice broke. I count bullets. That's what I do. That's the deal. That's the whole deal I made with myself when I was 17 years old, and you just, Carter, you just walked me right up to the line I said I'd never, Carter. Whitmore's voice cut through it. Do you know what your job is on this operation? She stopped. Say it out loud, he said. Emily swallowed. Ammunition, resupply, casualty support. That's right. Whitmore nodded slowly. That's exactly right. You're going to carry the ammo, that's all. Nobody is asking you to do anything else. Emily stared at him, and something in her chest was screaming, and she couldn't tell what it was screaming about. Then why? She said, "Do you look like that?" Whitmore didn't answer. He reached into his cargo pocket and pulled out a piece of paper folded once. He had carried it for 8 weeks. He handed it to her. Emily unfolded it. It was the target. 5 rounds, 100 meters, 1 ragged hole, and in the corner in Whitmore's blocky handwriting, a date and 4 words. She just did it. "I told you I'd need proof," he said. "Master Sergeant. Ability means nothing until the moment demands it, Carter." He said it quietly, and there was something in his face she had never seen before, something that looked almost like fear. "You've got a real skill. It doesn't belong to you. It never did. It belongs to whoever needs it on the day they need it." Emily looked at the target in her hands. "And if that day never comes," she asked. Whitmore picked up his cover and put it on. "Then you'll have been the luckiest soldier who ever lived," he said. "And I'll have wasted 8 weeks, and I will thank God for both." He walked out. Emily Carter stood alone in an empty operations center at 11 at night, holding a piece of paper with 5 holes in it, 3 hours and 40 minutes from a helicopter that was going to take her into the Hindu Kush. She folded the target carefully exactly along the crease he had made, and she put it in her chest pocket, right over her heart, where she would be carrying it 4 days later at 11,000 feet, when a rifle hit the dirt and a man screamed for anybody to pick it up. She was at the pad at 0240, 20 minutes early because Emily Carter had never in her life been on time for anything. On time was late. On time was a discrepancy. Sergeant Doyle was there too, which made no sense because Doyle was not going anywhere. "Sergeant, what are you doing?" "Nothing." "It's 3 in the morning. "I'm aware of the time, Carter." She looked at him. He was holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and he was not drinking it. "You came to watch me get on a helicopter." "I came out here for the weather," Doyle said. "It's lovely." Emily almost laughed and then found she couldn't. Doyle shifted his weight off the bad knee. "You got everything. I've got everything." "You got I've got everything, Sergeant. I made the list. I wrote the list." "Yeah," he nodded. "Yeah, you did." They stood there. The rotors weren't turning yet. Somewhere behind them, a generator coughed and settled. "Carter." "Sergeant." Doyle looked at the ground for a second, and when he looked back up, his face had done something Emily had never seen it do. "I've been in 20 years, he said. "You know how many people I've watched walk out to a bird? Don't. A lot. Sergeant, don't do this. I'm not doing anything. I'm making an observation." He cleared his throat hard. "You're the best soldier on this base, and nobody knows it, and it's been eating at me for 18 months, and I never said it out loud, and if I don't say it right now, I'm going to have to live with that, so." Emily's throat closed. "So," Doyle said. "There, said it." "Sergeant, don't get weird about it." "I'm not getting weird about it." "You look weird about it." Emily wiped her face with the heel of her hand fast and turned toward the pad so he couldn't see. Behind her, Doyle said very quietly, "Come back and count my bullets, Carter." She didn't turn around. "That's the plan," she said. Lieutenant Jack Reynolds did not do speeches. That was the first thing Emily learned about him, and she learned it in about 4 minutes. Standing in a circle of men she did not know at 3 in the morning, holding a rifle she was qualified to carry, in a job description she understood completely. Reynolds looked at his team. 11 men. Nobody said a word. "Everybody knows the plan," he said. "That was it. That was the speech." Then he pointed at Emily. "This is Specialist Carter. She's our logistics element. She fixed our load plan 4 days ago, and she was right. And none of you caught it, so nobody gives her a hard time. Anybody got a problem with a soldier who reads, 'Nobody did.' Good." A man near the back said, "She got a name or she just logistics?" "Carter," Emily said. "Cole." He didn't offer a hand. He was checking something on a case at his feet, and he didn't look up. "You ever been off the wire?" "No." "Huh." Cole nodded slowly, still not looking up. "Okay. That a problem?" "Nope." He snapped the case shut and stood, and now she saw him properly. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cole was maybe 30, 32, built like a guy who had never been in a hurry in his life. It's just information. Everything's information. He walked past her toward the bird and then stopped and turned back. "Hey, logistics." "Carter." "Carter." He almost smiled. How many rounds am I carrying? Emily didn't blink. You're carrying 80 for the precision rifle and 4 boxes of 20 lot number 6211, all from the same lot, because I pulled them from the same lot on purpose, and 180 for your carbine and 6 magazines, and you signed it for all of it at 2200 last night, at which point you were carrying 160 for the carbine, so you drew 2 more mags off somebody at some point in the last 5 hours and didn't tell me. The silence on that pad lasted about 2 full seconds. Then one of the SEALs said, "Oh, I like her." Cole stood there. "Same lot on purpose," he repeated. "Yes." "Why?" "Because different lots have different velocities," Emily said. "And at 800 meters, that's the difference between a hit and a miss, and you've got no way to know which box you grabbed in the dark, so I removed the variable." Ryan Cole looked at her for a long moment. "Who are you?" he said. "I count bullets," Emily said. And Cole laughed once genuinely, like something had surprised him for the first time in a while. "No, you don't," he said, and walked onto the bird. The flight in was 80 minutes, and Emily did not sleep for 1 second of it. She sat with her back against the bulkhead and her knees up and her hands flat on her thighs to keep them still. Nobody talked. That was the thing she hadn't expected. She'd imagined banter, jokes, something. Instead, there were 11 men in the dark doing absolutely nothing, and it was the loudest silence she had ever been in. Across from her, Ryan Cole was asleep. Actually asleep, mouth slightly open, his rifle case between his knees and one hand resting on it the way a man rests a hand on a dog. Emily stared at him with something close to hatred. At about the 40-minute mark, he opened one eye. "You're staring." "Sorry." "Don't apologize. Just say what you're thinking." Emily hesitated. "How are you asleep?" Cole closed the eye again. "Because in 40 minutes I'm going to need to be awake, and I can't be awake then if I'm awake now." "Math. That's not how sleep works." "It's how my sleep works." Pause. "You scared?" Emily's first instinct was to say no. She said yes. Cole opened both eyes. "Good," he said. "The other ones lie. Then they get out there, and it hits them all at once, and they're useless for the first 10 minutes. You're doing yours now. That's smart." "It doesn't feel smart." "Nothing smart ever does." He shifted, settling deeper. "You know what your job is?" "Ammunition resupply casualty support." "Say it again." "Ammunition resupply casualty support." "Right." Cole nodded. "So when it gets loud out there, and it will, you don't have to decide anything. You already know. You just do the next thing on the list. People freeze because they're trying to figure out what they are. You already know what you are." Emily looked at him. "Everybody keeps telling me what I am," she said. Cole shrugged. "Everybody's got a lot of time on their hands." He went back to sleep. Emily sat there in the dark with her hand pressed flat against her chest pocket, feeling the folded square of paper through the fabric. She did not know why she'd brought it. She would find out in 96 hours. They walked for 2 nights. That's the part nobody puts in the movies either. Iron Shadow was not a raid. It was a walk, uphill, in the dark, at altitude, carrying weight that Emily had personally calculated, impersonally packed, impersonally believed was correct right up until hour 6 of night 1, when her body informed her that arithmetic and reality were 2 different countries. She did not fall behind. That was the only thing she cared about. Not glory, not proving anything. She had one goal, and it was the smallest goal in the history of warfare: do not be the reason anybody slows down. At hour 9, one of the SEALs, a kid named Tanner, dropped back beside her. "Want me to take some of that?" "No." "Carter." "No, thank you." "It's not an insult." "I know it's not." Emily kept walking. "But everything in this bag has a number, and the number's in my head, and if you take some of it, the number's wrong, and then somebody asks me at 3 in the morning how many rounds we've got left, and I have to say, I don't know." Tanner walked next to her for another minute. "You're a strange person," he said. "Yeah," Emily said. "I've heard." At hour 11, she heard Reynolds' voice behind her low. "Carter." "Sir." "You've got 100 meters of climb left, and then we hole up." "Copy, sir." "You're going to make it." And Emily said in a voice that had absolutely no air left in it, "Sir, I've already got the numbers for tomorrow, so yes." Reynolds walked past her without another word. 40 minutes later at the halt, she heard him say quietly to Cole, "The clerk didn't drop." "Nope," Cole said. "You know what that means." Yeah, Cole said. Means she's not a clerk. Day 2 at the Hyde site, the thing happened that Emily would think about for the rest of her life. She was inventorying. Of course she was. It was 10 in the morning. They were under a rock overhang, doing nothing for the next 11 hours, and every single man there was either asleep or motionless, and Emily Carter had her ledger out. An actual paper ledger in the mountains. Cole watched her for about 10 minutes. Then he said, "What are you writing? Consumption." "We haven't consumed anything." "That's what I'm writing," Emily said. "Zero, day 2, zero, expended all. Lots intact temperature is 9 degrees, which means your ammo's colder than it was when I packed it, which means it's slower than it was when you zeroed it." Cole sat up slowly. "Say that last part again." "Your ammunition is at 9 degrees Celsius. You zeroed at what, 31-32 on the FOB in the afternoon. 31. That's a 22-degree delta." Emily didn't look up from the ledger. "That's velocity loss." "Not much. But you're planning shots past 600 and past 600, not much becomes something." Ryan Cole stared at her. "How much?" he said. "I don't know exactly. Depends on the powder, but it's not zero, and you're treating it like zero." Cole rubbed his face with both hands. Then he said out loud to nobody, 11 years. "Chief, 11 years I've been doing this." He looked at her. "And a logistics specialist just told me something about my own ammunition that I did not check this morning. I'm not trying to—" "Carter, stop." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for that." He was quiet for a second. "Where'd you learn that?" "Whitmore." Cole's head came up fast. "Dan Whitmore." Emily's stomach did something strange. "You know him." "Everybody knows him." Cole's voice had changed. "Everybody who does what I do knows him. He wrote half of what I was taught." Emily sat very still. "He's running remedial marksmanship for cooks at Ryder," she said. Cole laughed, and it was not a nice laugh. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds about right." "Why, whoa? Why what? Why is he there if he's who you say he is?" Cole looked at her a long moment, and Emily watched a man decide whether to tell her something. "That's not my story to tell," he said finally. "Chief, not my story, Carter." And that was the first hook in Emily Carter's chest that she couldn't pull out. At 1600 on day 2, Reynolds called her over. "Carter, you're the ammo point. Talk to me about 72 hours. "Sir, we're not going to be here 72 hours. Reynolds' expression didn't change. "Explain." "Because the load plan I fixed assumed a contested extract on hour 70. It didn't assume a contested infill." Emily laid the ledger flat. "Sir, we walked 2 nights and nobody shot at us." "That's good." "No, sir, it's not." Somewhere behind her, Cole stopped moving. "Sir, I've tracked every element that went into this valley for 18 months. Every single one of them got contacted in the first 6 hours. Every one. It's a transit corridor. There are people who live here and people who move through here, and they always shoot at the first thing they see." Emily's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "We've been on the ground the 31 hours and nothing has happened." Reynolds said, "You think we got lucky?" "Sir, I don't believe in luck. Luck can't repeat." She heard Whitmore's voice come out of her own mouth, and it startled her. "I think somebody decided not to shoot at us." Nobody said anything. Reynolds looked at Cole. Cole looked back. "Chief," Reynolds said, "thoughts?" Cole said slowly, "She's not wrong." "That's not a thought, that's an endorsement." "Fine, thought." Cole leaned forward. "If they didn't hit us on the walk, it's because the walk was worth more to them than we were." Meaning they let us come. The temperature under that overhang dropped about 10 degrees. Reynolds sat with it for maybe 4 seconds. That was all the time he gave anything. "Doesn't change the mission," he said. "No, sir," Cole said, "but it changes the extract." Reynolds looked at Emily. "Carter, redo the numbers assuming we fight our way out." Emily's mouth went dry. "Sir, if we fight our way out, we don't have enough." "I know." "Sir, I know specialist." Reynolds' voice was almost gentle, and that was worse than anything. "Do it anyway. I'd rather know the number than not." Emily did it. It took her 20 minutes, and when she was done, she looked at the page for a long time before she said it out loud. 90 minutes, she said. Reynolds nodded once. "Sustained contact all elements, everything we've got." 90 minutes. Emily's voice cracked on the last word, and she hated herself for it. "That's the number, sir. That's how long we exist." Reynolds took the ledger from her hands, looked at the P and handed it back. Then we won't take 90 minutes, he said and walked away. That night, Cole sat down next to her. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then he said, he was a friend of mine. Who? Whitmore. Cole was looking out at nothing. Not a friend, that's the wrong word. He was my instructor. 14 years ago. Emily didn't breathe. You want to know why he's teaching cooks? Yes. You sure, Chief? Because you're going to hear it, and then you're going to understand something about him you can't ununderstand, Cole said. So I'm asking, you sure? Emily said yes. Cole nodded. Dan Whitmore had a student, he said, about 12 years back. Best natural shooter he ever had. He said that, out loud, to people. That kid could do things Dan couldn't do at his best, and Dan knew it, and he was proud of it. Which you have to understand is not a normal thing for a man like that. What happened? The kid was 22 years old, and he'd been told he was a genius since he was 19. Cole's voice was very flat. Everybody told him. Dan told him. So on a hillside in Kennar, that kid took a shot he didn't have to take because he was a genius, because he could make it, because everybody said so. Emily waited. He made it, Cole said. The shot was perfect. It was a beautiful shot. Then, the muzzle flash gave up the position. Cole finally turned and looked at her. 2 men died. Not the kid. The kid lived. The 2 guys next to him didn't. Emily's hands had gone numb. Dan Whitmore quit teaching a month later, Cole said. Went to a schoolhouse and asked to be pulled off the line, and they said no, so he retired. 26 years. Just walked out. Because his student? No. Cole shook his head. You're not listening. Not because the kid missed, because the kid hit. He let that sit. Dan spent his whole career teaching people to be good, and he watched being good kill 2 men because he'd never once taught that kid when not to shoot. He taught him he was special. That was the mistake. That was the only mistake he ever made, and it cost 2 lives, and he has never gotten over it. Emily sat in the dark and felt the folded target in her chest pocket like it was on fire. He told me my hands were made for something else, she said. Cole went very still. He said that, yes, sis, to you. Yes, Ryan Cole turned his whole body toward her. Carter, his voice had dropped to almost nothing. Listen to me very carefully. Dan Whitmore has not said that sentence to a human being in 12 years. He would rather chew glass. Do you understand what I'm telling you? No. He looked at you, Cole said. And he broke his own rule. Emily couldn't speak. So whatever he saw, Cole said, it scared him enough to do the one thing he swore he'd never do again. He got up and walked away and left her sitting there with it. 12 minutes later, Emily Carter did the math she had been avoiding for 8 weeks. Whitmore hadn't trained her because she was gifted. Whitmore had trained her because she was the opposite of that kid. Because she didn't want it. Because the only person on that entire base who would never take a shot for glory was a supply clerk who was terrified of the scope. He hadn't found a genius. He'd found an insurance policy. And she did not know whether that was the kindest thing anybody had ever done for her or the cruelest. And she never got the chance to ask him, because at 04:15 on day 3, everything came apart. The intel was wrong. That's the whole sentence. That's the thing that killed people in that war more than anything else, and it never sounded like anything. 3 words on a page. The weapons cache was supposed to hold 8 to 12 fighters. Reynolds' element got eyes on it at 04:10, and Emily watched the lieutenant's face go through exactly one change, and it was small, and it was the worst thing she had ever seen. Chief, he said, count. Cole was behind the scope. He was quiet for a long time. Say the number, Chief. I've got 40, Cole said. Nobody moved. That's not 40, Reynolds said. No, sir. That's 40 that I can see. Cole didn't take his eye off the glass. There's a truck. There's a second truck. Sir, there's a generator running, and it's running for something because those buildings don't have lights. Emily heard her own voice say, how much ammunition are they moving? Every head turned. Reynolds said, say that again, Carter. Sir, if there's 40 men and 2 trucks, this isn't a cache. A cache is a hole in the ground with a tarp on it. Emily was talking fast now, and she couldn't stop. This is a distribution point. This is somebody's ammo point. Sir, that's what I do. That's literally what I do. I'm looking at my own job. Reynolds stared at her. If it's a distribution point, he said slowly, then there's a schedule. Yes, sir. And a schedule means more people are coming, Emily said. Sir, more people are always coming. Nobody runs a distribution point for 40 guys. You run it for 400. Reynolds turned to his radio operator. Get me the bird, he said. We're not doing this. And that was the moment Emily Carter learned that the worst thing in the world is not being ignored. It's being right. The helicopter came in at 0440. It never landed. Emily heard the sound before she understood the sound. It wasn't an explosion. It was a change in pitch, an engine going from one note to a different note, and every seal around her reacted a full second before she did, and that 1 second was the entire distance between her life and theirs. Somebody screamed, RPG, RPG, RPG. The bird came down about 400 meters east. It did not blow up. That's the part people get wrong. It came down hard and it slid and it stopped, and Emily could hear the rotor still turning, slowing that awful winding down sound. Then the whole valley opened up. Reynolds' voice came through it, absolutely level. Everybody breathe. Everybody breathe. Cole, do you have the ridge? I have the ridge. Work. And then Emily Carter did the only thing she knew how to do. She did the next thing on the list. Ammunition. She moved. She did not think about moving. She just moved, and she got to Tanner first because Tanner was closest, and Tanner was already shouting a number, and she put a magazine in his hand before he finished shouting it. How'd you were on your fourth, Emily said, already moving. You started with 6. She got to the next man, then the next. She kept the numbers in the middle of it with the noise ripping the air apart. Emily Carter kept the ledger in her head, and it was the only reason any of them stayed in the fight, and not one person on that hillside noticed she was doing it, which was fine. That was the whole job. At 0510, Reynolds grabbed her arm. Carter, where are we? Sir, we're at 31 minutes of 90. No, sir. Emily's voice didn't shake. That was the strangest part. It didn't shake at all. Of 90 if we were fighting at the rate I planned for. We're not. We're fighting at about 3 times that rate. Reynolds did the math faster than she could say it. So we've got... Sir, we have about 22 minutes. Reynolds looked at her, and Emily watched a man decide something. Chief, he shouted. Cole, I need that ridge gone. Right now. That's the whole thing. That's everything. Cole's voice came back unhurried, the same voice he had used talking about sleep on a helicopter. Working on it, sir. Chief, I'm not asking us on. I said I'm working on it. And Emily, 40 meters below, heard Ryan Cole's rifle go off and go off again. And each time it did, the pressure on that hillside eased by a fraction, and she understood for the first time in her entire life what one person with one skill was actually worth. She understood it completely. For about 90 more seconds. Then it stopped. Emily's head came up. She had been listening to that rifle the way you listen to a heartbeat without knowing you're listening, and it stopped, and her body knew before her mind did. Chief, nothing. Cole, Reynolds was shouting. Chief, report, nothing. And then Tanner from up on the rocks in a voice Emily would hear for the rest of her life, a voice that had no training in it at all, just a 23-year-old kid. Cole's hit. Cole's hit. Cole's hit. He's down. Emily was already moving, not thinking, moving. Casualty support. It was on the list. It was the third thing on the list, and she had said it out loud on a helicopter, and she did not have to decide anything. She came over the rocks, and she saw him. Ryan Cole was on his back, and he was conscious, and his left shoulder and chest were wrong in a way that Emily's brain refused to process, and his eyes found her, and he said something, and she couldn't hear it. Don't talk, he said it again. Emily got her hands on him and started doing what she had been trained to do, and Cole grabbed her wrist with a strength that terrified her. Carter. Chief, stop. Carter, his teeth were red. The ridge. Chief, they're moving. They're moving right now. I was the only thing. He coughed, and it was awful. I was the only thing stopping them, and I stopped. Emily's whole body went cold. She looked up, and the rifle was there, 3 feet away, in the dirt, where it had fallen out of his hands. Below her, Emily heard Lieutenant Jack Reynolds' voice go up for the first time in 3 days, and it was not level anymore. It was the sound of a man who had run out of options. Who can take that rifle? Nobody answered, because everybody was firing. Everybody was needed. Every single man on that hillside was already doing the only thing he could do. Somebody take the rifle. Nothing. And Emily Carter knelt in the dirt with her hands full of a dying man's blood and looked at 40 meters of open rock between her and a weapon she was not qualified to touch, and she felt the folded paper in her chest pocket press against her heart with every single beat. Cole's grip tightened on her wrist. "Hey," he said. She looked down at him. Ryan Cole's eyes were losing focus, and he was still the calmest man in that valley. "Same lot," he said. "You did that on purpose. Chief, you removed the variable." He tried to smile and mostly failed. "So there's no variable, Carter." "I count bullets," Emily said, and her voice broke completely. "Chief, I count bullets. That's what I do." And Ryan Cole said the last thing he had the air for. "Then go count them from up there." Emily Carter did not remember deciding. That was the thing she would try to explain for years afterward to boards and to reporters and to young soldiers who wanted a better answer, and she never once got it right. They all wanted the moment. They wanted the part where she looked at the rifle and chose. There was no part like that. There was Ryan Cole's hand falling off her wrist, and there was Reynolds screaming 40 meters below her. And then there was Emily crawling across open rock with her elbows and her knees and her chin in the dirt, and she could not have told you which second the first thing became the second thing. Her hand closed on the rifle. It was heavier than she expected. That was her first thought. 8 weeks on a berm at FOB Ryder with Whitmore's spare, and she had never once thought about the weight because weight doesn't matter when you're lying down for fun. Her second thought was the number. 80 rounds, 4 boxes of 20, lot 6211. Cole had fired 11. She knew that. She knew it the way she knew her own name. She had been counting since 0440 without ever deciding to count because that was the only thing Emily Carter's brain had ever done automatically. 69 rounds. Carter, Reynolds' voice. "Carter, what are you doing?" She didn't answer him. She couldn't. Her mouth wasn't connected to anything. She dragged the rifle in against her chest, and she rolled onto her stomach, and she pushed up to where Cole had been, and Cole's blood was already there in the dirt, and she put her elbows in it because there was nowhere else to put them. Then she stopped. Everything stopped. Because Emily Carter had done this 10,000 times, and every single one of those 10,000 times started the same way. And the way it started was not with the trigger. It started with getting comfortable. She heard Whitmore's voice flat and unbothered from a berm 11,000 kilometers away. "Sometime today, Carter?" "No," she said out loud. "You don't rush this." "Carter, is that you up there?" That was Tanner, 20 feet to her left on his back changing a magazine with hands that were not working. "Tanner, stay down." "Carter, is that Cole's?" "Tanner, stay. I'll say Tang." And she moved her left leg 2 inches. She took the buttstock out of her shoulder and put it back in slightly different. And on that hillside at 0514 in the morning, with 40 men coming down a ridge and 22 minutes of ammunition left in the entire element, a supply specialist from Montrose County, Colorado, lay in another man's blood and took 11 full seconds to get comfortable. Reynolds saw it from below. He would talk about it once years later to exactly one person, and he would say, "I've watched a lot of people pick up a weapon. Everybody's fast. Everybody's fast because they're scared. She was the slowest human being I have ever seen in my life, and I thought, oh God, she's frozen, she's locked up, I've killed a clerk." He was wrong. She wasn't frozen. She was doing the ledger, distance. She put her eye behind the glass, and the world came at her the way it had come at her the first time, 600 meters folding into 6 feet, and the panic hit her so hard she almost let go of the rifle. "It's not paper anymore." "Stop it," she whispered. "It's not paper. Those are men. Those are men, and they're walking, and you can see their—" "Stop it." Emily Carter closed her eyes. For 1 full second in the middle of a firefight, she closed her eyes. And in the dark behind her own eyelids, she said the only sentence she had left. "It's a ledger." She opened them, and the shaking stopped. Not because she was brave. She would tell anyone who asked that it had nothing to do with brave. It stopped because she had given her hands something to do that they already knew how to do. And Emily Carter's hands had never once been wrong about anything. Temperature 9 degrees, ammunition cold. Coal zeroed at 31, velocity down, round low. How much she didn't know. That was the terrible part. She didn't know. She had told Cole it wasn't zero, and he had stared at her, and she had been right, and neither of them had actually worked out the number. Because they were going to do it later. They were going to do it at the hide site. They had time. They had not had time. Chief, she said out loud, I need the number. And behind her from the dirt in a voice like paper tearing, Ryan Cole said, .4. Emily's whole body seized. He was alive. Chief, .4 mil low. Cole was not moving. He couldn't. But his mouth still worked and his brain, his awful, beautiful 11-year brain was still running. Past 600. Hold .4 up. Don't touch the turret. Chief, why don't I touch the... Because you'll turn it the wrong way. Cole coughed. Everybody turns it the wrong way the first time. Hold it. Don't dial it. Emily put the reticle on the ridge. Chief, I've got movement at... I don't care what you've got. Carter. His voice dropped. Carter, listen. Look at me. I'm not looking at you, Chief. I'm looking at the ridge. Good, Cole said. Good girl. Don't ever look at me again. And then Ryan Cole, 40 meters from the enemy, with a hole in his chest, gave the last sniper lesson of his career. The machine gun first, he said. What? There's a machine gun, left side. There's always a machine gun, and it's always on the left because the ground's flatter. He stopped to breathe, and it took him a long time. You take the gun first, not the men. The gun. Men don't kill you. Guns kill you. Emily found it. She found it, and her heart went through the floor because there were 3 of them, and they were setting it, and they were fast, and they were good, and she had watched Doyle set up a 240 in about 40 seconds on a range at Ryder, and these men were doing it in 20. Chief, they're almost, how far? 620. You sure? Emily's mouth was completely dry. Chief, I don't have a rangefinder. I don't have a... You sure, Carter? And Emily Carter, who had never been wrong about a number in 18 months, said yes. Then it's 620, Cole said. .4 up. Wind's nothing, it's dead, don't invent wind. Emily settled. Breathe out, natural pause. Don't fight the reticle. Let it settle. Below her, the entire hillside was screaming and burning and coming apart. And inside Emily Carter's head, there was a berm at 11 at night and a 51-year-old man saying again, in the most boring voice in the world, the trigger should surprise you. It surprised her. Emily didn't see the hit. That's what nobody understands. You don't see it. The rifle moves and the glass jumps, and for a fraction of a second, the world is gone. Then it came back, and the machine gun was not being set up anymore. Emily Carter made a sound. She never knew what it was. Doyle would ask her about it years later because Tanner told him, because Tanner was 20 feet away and heard it, and Tanner said it was the worst sound he'd ever heard a human being make, and he'd been to 2 more deployments after that one. It wasn't triumph. It was the sound of a woman finding out something about herself that she had spent 25 years arranging her entire life to never find out. Carter, Cole's voice. Carter, stay with me. I hit it. I know. Chief, I hit it, Carter, sharp as he had left. Not now, you can have that later. You can have all of it later. I promise you can have it for the rest of your life. Not now. Emily's eye was still behind the glass. There's more, she said. There's always more, Cole said. Next. At 0519, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds understood what was happening on the rocks above him. He understood it in stages the way everyone did. First, he heard the shot and assumed Cole had somehow gotten back up. Then he heard the second one, 8 seconds later, and thought, no, that's not Cole's rhythm. Cole's faster than that. Then the third, 8 seconds. Then the fourth, 8 seconds. And Jack Reynolds on his belly behind a rock in the middle of the worst morning of his professional life started laughing. Tanner next to him said, Sir, do you hear that? Hear what, sir? Count it, Reynolds said. Kid, count it. Tanner listened. The 5th shot, 8 seconds. Sir, it's the same, Tanner said. Every time. It's exactly the same. That's right. Sir, that's not, people don't do that. Cole doesn't even do that. No, Reynolds said, they don't. And he keyed his radio and said in a voice his men had never heard from him, all elements. We have a shooter. I say again, we have a shooter. Hold what you've got and let her work. Emily fired her 6th round at 0521 and the ridge broke. Not all of it, not even most of it, but the men who had been walking down that ridge like they owned it, the men who had been told by somebody with a radio that the American eye was blind, now stopped walking. And they got down, and the whole pressure on that hillside changed. and every man in Reynolds's element felt it in his chest like the tide going out. Then Emily made her mistake. She would understand it later. Whitmore had told her. Whitmore had told her 100 times, and she had listened and nodded and written it in the ledger of her head, and it had meant nothing because you cannot learn this one from a man talking. She got greedy. There was a man moving between two rocks at maybe 590, and he was moving fast, and she had him. She had him, she could feel that she had him, and something in her chest said, take it, and she took it. She rushed. 6 seconds instead of 8. The round went somewhere, she never knew where, and the muzzle flash gave up the position. Carter, move! That was Cole. That was a man with a punctured chest flat on his back who could not see the ridge, who could not see anything screaming with the last real air in his body. Move, move, get off that rock, Emily rolled. She rolled off the position and down about 4 feet, and the rock she had been lying behind came apart above her, and pieces of it hit her face and her neck and her hands, and she lay there in the dirt with her arms over her head and Ryan Cole's rifle clutched against her chest like a child holding a doll. She was crying. She didn't know it. She found out afterward from the salt on her lip. Carter, she couldn't answer. Carter, are you hit? I don't know, she said. I don't know. Are you bleeding? I'm bleeding, but I don't think it's Chief. They saw me. They saw the flash. I did the thing. I did the exact thing. Yeah, Cole said. You did. And Emily Carter, 25 years old, lying in another man's blood on a mountain in the Hindu Kush, said the truest sentence of her life. I got greedy. There was a long pause. Then Ryan Cole said, and there was something in his voice that she would think about until the day she died. Something that sounded almost like relief. Say that again. I got greedy, Chief. I saw him, and I wanted him, and I took 6 seconds instead of 8, and I knew while I was doing it. Carter. Cole was fading now. She could hear it, the words coming further apart. You just did in 90 seconds what most guys take 4 years to do. What? You caught yourself. Emily lay there. Some guys never catch it, Cole said. Some guys go their whole career and they never once know when they got greedy. They just think the wind changed. And on a hillside in Cunark, 12 years earlier, a 22-year-old genius had taken a beautiful shot and never once known that he was greedy. And 2 men had died beside him, and a master sergeant with 26 years had walked away from the only thing he had ever loved. Emily understood it then, all at once, complete. Whitmore had not been teaching her to shoot. He had been teaching her to stop. Chief, she said. Chief, I have to go back up. Nothing. Chief, nothing. Run. And Ryan Cole from somewhere very far away said different rock. At 0526, Emily Carter went back up. Different rock. 11 meters left. She crawled it on her stomach with the rifle cradled, and every meter of it took a year, and the entire time her brain was screaming a single sentence on a loop. They know you're here now. They know you're here now. They know you're here now. She got there. She got comfortable. 11 seconds. She would not shorten it. Not for anything. Not if the mountain fell on her. Then she keyed the radio that Cole had been wearing, that she had pulled off him with hands slick with his blood, and she said the first words she had spoken on a military net in her entire life. Any station, this net, this is... She stopped because she did not know what to call herself. Reynolds's voice came back instantly. Go ahead, Carter. And Emily heard the way he said it. Not specialist, not clerk, not logistics. Carter. Sir, she said, I've got 62 rounds. There was a pause. Say again, Carter. 62, sir. Lot 6211, same lot, no variation. That's what I've got, and that's all I've got, and when it's gone, it's gone. Reynolds said very quietly, how many do you need? And Emily Carter looked through the glass at a ridge full of men who wanted to kill everyone she had walked 2 nights with, and she did the only thing she had ever known how to do. She counted. Sir, she said, I need 9. The silence on that net lasted 3 seconds. Then Reynolds said, 9. Yes, sir. Carter, there's 40 men on that ridge. Yes, sir, and there's 9 of them that matter. Her voice was completely level now, and she did not know where it had come from. Sir, they've got 2 crew-served weapons and 1 truck that's running, and a man on the left with a radio who keeps standing up because he thinks he's out of range, and everybody on that ridge is looking at him before they move. Reynolds said, how do you know they're looking at him? Because I look at him, sir, Emily said. He's the ammunition. Reynolds didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said one word, work. She started at 0529. She took the second crew-served weapon first, and it took her 2 rounds because she was low on the first one, and she corrected without thinking, without emotion, the way you correct a column that doesn't balance. 60. She took the truck's engine block at 410 meters, and it stopped being a truck. 59. She took the 2 men trying to move the first machine gun to a new position, and she did it 8 seconds apart, and she did not rush either one. 57. And down on that hillside, 11 men who had been dying started very slowly to stop dying. Tanner would say later that the strangest thing was the quiet, not real quiet. There was nothing quiet about it. But the fire coming down at them thinned out and thinned out and thinned out, and it thinned out in a pattern, and after the 4th or 5th one, you started to be able to feel where she was looking. Sir, he said to Reynolds, she's hurting them. I know. Sir, she's putting them where she wants them. Tanner. Sir, that's a clerk. Tanner, shut up and shoot, Reynolds said, and then half a second later. Yeah, I know. At 0534, Emily found the man with the radio. He was doing exactly what she had told Reynolds he was doing. He was standing up. He had been standing up for 10 minutes because he had decided at some point that whatever had killed his machine gun teams could not reach him. He was at 840 meters. Emily's hands went cold. 840. She had never fired past 600 in her life. Not once, not on a berm, not on a range, not in a dream. Whitmore had talked about it for 40 minutes one night with a case open on the ground, and she had listened, and it had all been theory. It had all been ledger, and now it was 840 meters of actual air with actual gravity in it. Chief, she said. Nothing. Chief, I need nothing. Emily Carter was alone. That was the moment. If you want the moment, that's it. Not the rifle, not the first shot. It was a 25-year-old supply specialist calling for a dead man's voice and getting silence back. She lay there with her eye behind the glass, and she started to come apart. And then from somewhere she heard Whitmore. You know what your problem is, Carter? Not in a mystical way. She was very clear about that afterward. Nobody spoke to her. Nothing came down from heaven. It was just her own memory running the way memory runs when there's nothing else left in the tank. You think you're just the person carrying the ammunition. Emily wiped her eye with her sleeve. Yeah, she whispered. I know. She did the arithmetic. Out loud, on a mountain, in the middle of a gunfight. She said the numbers out loud because saying numbers out loud was the single most familiar act of her entire adult life. And Emily Carter needed one familiar thing, or she was going to die on that rock. 840 meters. Cold ammunition, 9 degrees, zeroed at 31, 0.4 mil at 600. More at 840. How much more? It's not linear. Nothing's linear. Whitmore said, nothing's ever linear. He said the round slows down, and the slower it goes, the more the air takes and the more the ground pulls. I don't know, Emily said. And then she said the thing that saved 11 lives. So I'll find out. She fired. Round 57. She watched it. That was the whole point. She had one job on that shot, and it was not to hit, it was to see. And she saw it. Low and right, and she read the ground where it landed the way she'd read a ledger with a discrepancy in it, and she knew immediately exactly precisely how wrong she had been. The man with the radio dropped down behind cover. Carter, Reynolds on the net. Carter, you missed. No, sir, Emily said. I measured. You what? Sir, stand by. And Emily Carter lay behind a rock with 56 rounds and waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Reynolds, Carter, what are you doing? Waiting, sir. Carter, sir, he's going to stand up. Why would he stand up? Because he's been standing up for 15 minutes and nothing's happened to him, Emily said. And because he just watched a round land 4 meters from where he was, and in about 20 more seconds, he's going to decide that we can't reach him. That's a guess. No, sir. Emily's voice did not move. That's what people do. 40 seconds, 50. Tanner on the net whispering, sir, we're running out of... Everybody be quiet, Reynolds said. 58 seconds. The man stood up. Emily Carter held 0.4 of a mil more than she had held on the last round, and she breathed out and she let the reticle settle, and she did not fight it, and she took 8 seconds, exactly 8 seconds, the same 8 seconds she had taken 10,000 times on a berm, at FOB Ryder, while a man with a bad knee said again until she wanted to scream. The trigger surprised her. 55 rounds. Odd rounds. And on that ridge at 840 meters, the ammunition stopped moving. Nobody on that hillside cheered. That's the part that always shocked people when Emily told it on the rare occasions she told it. There was no cheer. There was nothing. There was just 40 men on a ridge who suddenly did not know what to do next because the person who told them what to do next was gone, and Emily Carter had known that would happen because Emily Carter had spent 18 months being the person who told everybody what they had. She knew exactly what a unit looks like when its ammunition stops arriving. She had just done to them what she had spent her whole career making sure nobody could ever do to her own side. At 0541, the ridge started pulling back. Reynolds' voice on the net hoarse. All elements, they're breaking. They're breaking. Nobody chase them. Nobody chase them. Hold what you've got. Emily didn't move. She stayed on the glass, and she watched them go, and she did not fire again. And that was the hardest thing she did all morning, harder than the first shot, harder than 840. She had 55 rounds. She could have taken more. She could have taken a lot more. Tanner would say afterward that he was watching her, and he did not understand it, that there were men in the open running, absolutely in the open, and she just lay there. Carter, Reynolds on the net. Carter, you still up? I'm up, sir. You've got shots. Yes, sir. Carter. And Emily. Carter said in a voice that came out of somewhere very old and very tired, Sir, they're leaving. There was a long, long pause on that net. Then Jack Reynolds said, Roger. And that was all. And 12 years and 1 month after a 22-year-old genius took a beautiful shot in Kunar Barn, a supply clerk in the Hindu Kush did not. She came off the rock at 0549. She came off it wrong, half falling, and she landed on her knees next to Ryan Cole, and she got her hands on his neck, and she could not find anything. Chief? She moved her fingers. Chief, come on. Nothing. Ryan. And then under her fingers so faint she thought she was inventing it. Something. Medic, Emily screamed. It came out of her like something tearing. Medic, I've got a pulse. I've got a pulse. Get up here. 2 men came up those rocks so fast that one of them cut his hands open on the way. Emily got shoved backward, and she went willingly. She sat down hard about 6 feet away with her back against a rock and Cole's rifle across her lap, and she watched them work on him, and she could not make her hands stop. Now they wouldn't stop, not up there. Up there, they'd been the steadiest things in Afghanistan. Down here, 6 feet from the man, they were shaking so hard the rifle rattled. Reynolds came up. He looked at Cole. He looked at the medics. He looked at Emily. Then Lieutenant Jack Reynolds, 12 deployments, sat down in the dirt next to a supply specialist and did not say anything for about a minute. Finally, he said, How many? Emily's teeth were chattering. Sir. Rounds. How many did you fire? 25. You're sure? Emily laughed. It was a horrible sound. Sir, I'm sure. 25. Reynolds nodded slowly. You said you needed 9. I was wrong, sir. Carter. I was wrong. Her voice went up. I said 9 and it was 25 and I was wrong, sir. I've never been wrong. I have never once in 18 months been specialist. Emily stopped. Reynolds looked at her. And this man who had not raised his voice all morning, except once when he was screaming for somebody to pick up a rifle, said, There are 11 of us. Emily stared at him. Do you understand what I just said? Reynolds asked. There are 11 of us. That's the number. That's the only number on this mountain that matters, and it hasn't changed since 0400. Emily's face came apart. She put both hands over it, and she made no sound at all. And Jack Reynolds sat next to her in the dirt and didn't touch her, and didn't talk, and didn't leave. After a while, he said, Where'd you learn to shoot? And Emily, through her hand, said, A berm. A what? A berm, sir, at Ryder. At night. She wiped her face, and it did no good at all. There's a man there who wouldn't leave me alone about it. Reynolds went very still. Whitmore, he said. Yes, sir. Reynolds looked out at nothing for a second. Then he said half to himself, That old son of a gun. The birds came at 0620. 2 of them. And they came in hot and low, and they came in on a valley that had gone quiet, and Emily Carter was still sitting in the dirt with Ryan Cole's rifle across her lap, and she had not moved, and nobody had asked her to. They loaded Cole first. She stood up when they carried him past, and she didn't know why she stood up. It just happened, and Tanner stood up too, And then all of them did. Every single man on that hillside in the middle of a hostile valley with the enemy 400 meters away stood up for about 3 seconds while a stretcher went past. Then Tanner said, "Carter, come on. I'm coming. Carter. I said I'm coming." She wasn't moving. Tanner came back and stood in front of her. "Hey," he said. "Hey, it's over." Emily Carter looked up at a 23-year-old kid from Ohio with somebody else's blood on his sleeve, and she said, "Tanner, I don't know what I am anymore." Tanner opened his mouth and then closed it because he was 23 years old and he had absolutely nothing for that. So he did the only thing he could think of. He reached down and he took the rifle out of her hands gently, the way you take something away from someone who's been holding it too long. Emily let him, and then she pushed herself up off that rock and she reached for her ammunition bag because it was still there. It had been there the whole time 40 meters away, where she had dropped it at 0513 without ever deciding to. She picked it up. She put it on. And Specialist Emily Carter, United States Army, walked onto that helicopter carrying exactly what she had carried onto the last one. Nobody said a word to her the whole flight out. Not one word. But at about the 20-minute mark, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds reached across the aisle and put his hand flat on her ammunition bag just for a second, just long enough that she felt it. And that was the entire conversation. 80 minutes later, at FOB Ryder, the ramp came down, and there were about 30 people on that pad because word travels, word always travels, and standing at the very front with a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago was Sergeant Marcus Doyle. He took one look at her face, at her hands, at the blood that was not hers. And Doyle, who had been in 20 years, who had watched a lot of people walk out to a bird, said, "Carter, what did you do?" And Emily Carter, standing on that ramp, could not answer him, because behind Doyle at the back of that crowd, standing perfectly still, with his cover in his hands, was Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore. And he was looking at her the way a man looks at something he prayed would never happen. He didn't come to her. That was the first thing that broke her, and she hadn't even been off the ramp for 10 seconds. Emily stood there with the ammunition bag on her shoulder, and 30 people looking at her, and Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore at the back of that crowd with his cover in his hands, and he did not take one single step toward her. He just looked at her, and then he put his cover on and walked away. Doyle saw her face change. "Carter, nothing." "Carter, hey." "I said it's nothing, Sergeant." She walked past him. She walked past all 30 of them. Somebody said her name and she didn't hear who. Somebody else put a hand out toward her arm and she moved around it without looking, and she went straight across that pad and into her warehouse, and she set the ammunition bag on the floor by the desk exactly where it belonged. Then she opened the ledger. Doyle came in about a minute later and found her writing. He stood in the doorway for a long time. "Carter." "Ammunition expended day 3, Emily said, not looking up. 25 rounds, precision lot, 6211. 240 rounds, 5.56 mixed lots. I'll break it out by man tomorrow when I've got their Carter. When I've got their countess, because Tanner won't remember. Tanner never remembers. I have to count his magazines for him. Emily." She stopped writing. Sergeant Marcus Doyle had never once in 18 months used her first name. "Put the pen down," he said. She didn't. "Put the pen down, please." Emily Carter looked at the ledger, and she saw that she had written the same line 3 times. She set the pen down very carefully, and then she put both hands flat on the desk, and she said in a completely normal voice, "Sergeant, I need you to leave." "No." "Sergeant." "I've been in 20 years, Doyle said. "I'm not leaving." And Emily Carter, who had not made a sound on that helicopter, who had not made a sound in front of Reynolds, who had held it together for 240 minutes of flight and 30 people on a pad, put her head down on that ledger and came apart in a supply warehouse in eastern Afghanistan at 0815 in the morning, while a 38-year-old sergeant with a bad knee stood there and led her. He didn't say it was okay. That was the thing she loved him for the rest of her life. He never once said it was okay. He just said, "Yeah," over and over. Yeah, I know, yeah." Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cole was alive when they put him on the surgical table at Bagram at 0940. He was alive at 11:20 when they took him into a second surgery. Nobody would tell Emily anything because Emily was a specialist in a logistics unit and Ryan Cole was a Navy SEAL, and there was no line on any form anywhere connecting those two facts. She asked 4 times, The fourth time, the sergeant at the aid station said, not unkindly, "Specialist, are you family?" Emily stood there. "No," she said, and she walked out. At 1400, First Lieutenant Brady Kessler came into her warehouse. Doyle saw him coming and said low, "Carter, go in the back." "No." "Carter, no, Sergeant." Kessler stopped in the middle of that concrete floor. He didn't do his routine. He didn't tap a crate. He stood there and looked at her, and Emily saw something in his face she had never seen before and did not have a word for. "Is it true?" he said. "Sir, don't do that." Kessler's voice was strange. "Don't do the thing where you make me say it. Is it true?" Emily said nothing. "They're saying you picked up Cole's rifle." "Yes, sir." "They're saying you—" He stopped. He actually stopped. "Tanner's telling people you hit a man at 800 meters. 840, sir." Brady Kessler stood in that warehouse for about 4 seconds. Then he said, "I'm sorry." Emily's head came up. "I'm not saying it because you did something," Kessler said fast, like he'd been holding the whole thing in his mouth on the walkover. "I'm saying it because I was wrong for 4 months, and I knew I was wrong the whole time. I knew it. I knew it on the range that day. I knew it the second Whitmore called me out. Sir, I shot a 6-inch group and blamed the wind." He laughed at himself, and it was a terrible sound. "There was no wind, Carter. I stood there, and I lied in front of 40 people because it was easier than being the guy who's not as good as the clerk." Emily didn't know what to do with her hands. "Sir, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Kessler looked at the floor. "My father's a colonel. Did you know that? Course you didn't. Why would you?" He shook his head. "Everybody in my family's a colonel, and I came out here and I found out in about 6 weeks that I'm not very good at this, and instead of getting better, I found the one person on this base who wouldn't fight back, and I made her my whole personality." Doyle, behind a shelf, was not even pretending anymore. "So," Kessler cleared his throat. "That's it. That's what I came to say." He turned to go. "Sir," he stopped. Emily said, "Do you want to know what actually happened up there?" Kessler turned around slowly. "Yes," he said. "I got greedy," Emily said. "About 90 seconds in, I saw a man moving and I wanted him, and I rushed the shot, and I missed, and they saw my flash and they nearly took my head off." Kessler stared at her. "That's not the version Tanner's telling," he said. "No, sir, it isn't." Emily's voice was flat. "But it's the version that's true, and you're the first person who's asked, so you're the one who gets it." Kessler stood there a long moment. "Why are you telling me that?" And Emily said, "Because you just told me the truth about your group, sir. So I figured I'd tell you the truth about mine." Brady Kessler walked out of that warehouse, and Doyle came around the shelf and said, "What in God's name just happened?" He apologized. "Carter, that man has not apologized to another human being since he was 6 years old." "I know." Doyle rubbed his face. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing," Emily said. "I think somebody else did it." She found Whitmore at 2100. He was on the berm. Of course he was on the berm. He was sitting on an ammo can in the dark with the case closed at his feet, and he had not fired a round. And Emily stood behind him for probably a full minute before he said anything. "You want to sit down, or you want to stand there and hate me?" "I'm deciding." "Take your time." Emily sat down. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then she said, "You walked away." "Yep." "On the pad, there were 30 people, and you walked away." "Yep." "Master Sergeant, I came off that ramp, and I looked for you." Her voice was shaking. "I looked for you, and you put your cover on, and you left." Whitmore was quiet. Then he said, "Carter, do you know what I would have done if I'd walked up to you on that pad?" "No." "I'd have hugged you," Emily blinked, "and 30 people would have watched me do it," Whitmore said. "And every single one of them would have understood in about half a second that I had something to do with what happened in that valley. And then it would have been my story." Emily sat with that. "It's not my story," Whitmore said. "It never was. I wasn't there. I didn't do it. You did it, and if I'd put my arms around you on that pad, I'd have taken a piece of it. And Carter, I have taken pieces of other people's stories before, and it cost 2 men their lives." Emily's whole body went cold. "I know about Kunar," she said. Whitmore did not move. "Cole told me," she said. For a long, long time, Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore said absolutely nothing. Then he said in a voice she had never heard from him, How is he? They won't tell me. Carter. They won't tell me, Master Sergeant. Her voice broke wide open. I'm not family. I'm not in his unit. I'm a specialist in a logistics company, and there is no piece of paper anywhere that says I have the right to know whether he's alive, and I had my hands on his neck. I had my hands on his, Carter. And he told me to go count them from up there. That's what he said. That's the last thing he said to me. And nobody will tell me if he's Carter. She stopped. Whitmore stood up. It took him a second with the knee. He's alive, he said. Emily couldn't breathe. They pulled him through the second surgery at 1500. He's on a plane to Landstuhl right now. How do you know? Because I've been making phone calls since 0700, Whitmore said, and I still know 4 people and one of them owed me. Emily put both hands over her mouth. He's not going to be a sniper anymore, Whitmore said quietly. That shoulder's done, but he's going to be alive, and he's going to be alive for about 40 more years, and he's going to have children, and they're going to be annoying, and Carter, that happened because a supply clerk went up on a rock. Emily made a sound, and Whitmore let her make it. Then she said, why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you now. You've known for 6 hours. Yeah, Whitmore said. And I sat out here on this berm for 6 hours trying to figure out how to say it because, Carter, I have been rehearsing this conversation for 12 years, and I still don't know how to have it. Emily wiped her face. Say the rest, she said. What rest? You know what rest, Master Sergeant. Say it. Whitmore looked out at a berm he'd stood on 100 nights. I used you, he said. Emily didn't move. Not the way you're thinking, but I did. He sat back down heavily. There was a kid 12 years ago. He was the best I ever had. And I spent 3 years telling that kid he was special until he believed it more than he believed physics, and then he took a shot to prove I was right. And 2 men who trusted him burned to death on a hillside because of a muzzle flash. Emily's throat closed. And I got out, Whitmore said. And I swore I'd never teach another human being to shoot as long as I lived because I'd figured out what I actually was. I wasn't a teacher. I was a guy who made people feel special. And that's the most dangerous thing you can hand a 22-year-old with a rifle. Then why me? Whitmore turned and looked at her. Because you were the only person I have ever met who did not want it. Emily stared at him. I watched you take a 100-meter group that most of my career guys can't shoot, Whitmore said. And then I watched your face in Carter being proud. You were embarrassed. You wanted to put that target in your pocket and go back to your warehouse and never speak of it again. So I thought there she is. Whitmore's voice cracked, actually cracked, and Emily had not known that was possible. There's the one. There's the one who will never take the shot for herself. And God forgive me, I sat down and I made a decision that I had no right to make. I decided I'd rather ruin your life than have you be 100 meters from a fallen rifle and not know how to use it. The berm went silent. Master Sergeant, Emily said, you didn't ruin my life. Ask me in 10 years. No. She turned toward him. Look at me. He didn't. Look at me, Dwight. Whitmore looked at her. I got greedy, Emily said. Whitmore's face went white. 90 seconds in, I saw a man and I wanted him, and I rushed and I missed, and I gave up my position, and they blew that rock apart 4 inches over my head. Whitmore's hands were shaking. Say the next part, he whispered. I caught it, Emily said. I lay in the dirt with a dead man's rifle, and I said out loud, I got greedy. And then I moved 11 meters, and I did it right for the next 22 rounds, and I never rushed one again. Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore put his face in his hands. He was 51 years old, and he had 26 years and a chest full of things he never talked about. And he sat on an ammo can on a berm in Afghanistan and cried like a man who had been carrying something for 12 years and had just been allowed to set it down. Emily didn't touch him. She just sat there. After a long time, he said muffled, that kid never caught it. I know. Not once. Not in 3 years. I'd tell him and he'd nod at me and he'd do it again the next week. Whitmore wiped his face with the heel of his hand, hard angry at it. Do you know what that does to a man, watching somebody nod at you? Yes, Emily said. I've been nodded at. Whitmore laughed. It came out wrecked. Yeah, he said. I guess you have. He stood up. Carter, there's one more thing and then I'm done, and I'm never going to talk about this again. Master Sergeant. 25 rounds, he said. Emily froze. 25, Reynolds told me. You had 55 left and men in the open and you stopped. Whitmore looked at her and his eyes were red and absolutely steady. Do you understand what you did? They were leaving. Yeah, Whitmore said. They were leaving. He picked up the case. That's the whole thing, he said. Everybody thinks the job is the shot you take. It's not. 26 years, Carter and I never once figured out how to teach the other one. He started walking off the berm. Master Sergeant, he stopped. You just did, Emily said. Whitmore stood there with his back to her for about 5 seconds. Then he kept walking and he didn't say anything else. And Emily Carter sat on that berm alone until 0100 in the morning. The next 4 days were the worst of her life and nothing happened during any of them. That's what nobody warns you about. She kept waiting for the crash and the crash didn't come and it didn't come and it didn't come and she started to think maybe she was fine. She wasn't fine. She found out on day 4 at 11:20 in the morning in the chow hall when somebody dropped a metal tray. Emily Carter was on the floor, under the table. She had no memory of getting there. Her hands were over her head and her breath was gone, and there were 60 people in that room and every single one of them was looking at her. Doyle got to her first. Hey, Carter, it's a tray. It's a tray, kid. She couldn't speak. I know. Come on, we're gonna walk out of here. He got her up and he walked her out with one hand on her back, and Emily could hear the room behind her, could hear it in a way that made her want to and Doyle just kept saying, don't look at him, don't look at him, look at the door. Outside, she got about 20 feet and threw up. Doyle held her ruck strap so she wouldn't go down. When she could talk, she said, Sergeant, I'm sorry I'm so. Carter, if you apologize to me right now, I swear to God. I don't know what's happening to me, but I do, Doyle said. Emily looked up at him. Yeah, Doyle said, I do. He was very quiet. 19 years old, Iraq. I was on a truck. You know what put me on the floor for 6 months? A car door, not a bomb. A car door slamming in a Walmart parking lot in Georgia. Emily stared at him. Nobody ever tells you, Doyle said. You come home and everybody says thank you for your service, and nobody ever says, hey, by the way, your body's going to keep fighting for a while after your brain quits. How long? Depends. Sergeant, how long? Doyle looked at her. Some of it forever, he said. Not like this. This part gets better. But some of it, you're going to carry Carter, and I'm not going to lie to you about that because you're the only person on this base who's never lied to me about a number. Emily sat down in the dirt with her back against the wall. Everybody keeps calling me a hero, she said. Yep. Sergeant, I killed 9 people. Doyle sat down next to her slow because of the knee. Yep, he said. Emily started shaking again. I see them, she said. Not in dreams. That's the part nobody says. Everybody asks about the nightmares. I don't have nightmares, Sergeant. I have 4 in the afternoon and I'm doing an inventory and I'm fine. And then I see the guy with the radio standing up. Doyle didn't say anything. He stood up because he thought he was safe, Emily said. That's the whole reason. He was 840 meters away and he'd been standing up for 15 minutes because nothing had happened to him, and I knew he'd do it again, and I waited for him. Carter. I waited for him, Sergeant. That's not a reflex. That's not somebody shooting at me and me shooting back. I lay there for 58 seconds and I waited for a man to make a mistake. Doyle let that sit for a long time. Then he said, was he the ammunition? Emily's head turned. You told Reynolds he was the ammunition, Doyle said. Tanner told me. Whole base knows that line, Carter. Yes. Then let me ask you something. Doyle looked at her. In 18 months, how many convoys did you push out that gate with rounds you counted? I don't. How many, Carter? 206, Emily said. Right. Doyle nodded. And how many people do you figure died on the other end of those rounds? Emily stopped breathing. You never once thought about it, Doyle said quietly. Not because you're cold, because there were 400 meters and a truck and 11 other people between you and the answer. That's all. That's the only difference between what you did last week and what you've been doing every single day since you got here. That's not the same. No, Doyle agreed. It's not the same. It's just honest. Emily put her hands over her face. The scope took away the 400 meters, Doyle said. That's it. That's the whole thing. You've been in this war since day one, Carter. Last week's the first time it lets you see. At 1600 on day 5, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds came to FOB Ryder. Emily found out because Doyle came sprinting into the warehouse, actually sprinting on the bad knee. Carter, outside. Sergeant, what? Outside right now, don't ask. Reynolds was standing on the pad. So was Tanner. So were 4 other men she recognized and 2 she didn't. And so was Whitmore standing off to the side with his hands behind his back. Reynolds saw her and started walking. Emily came to attention because she did not know what else to do. Stop that, Reynolds said. Sir, Opie, Carter, I have flown 400 kilometers on a helicopter I had to beg for. Do not stand at attention at me. Emily's hands dropped. Reynolds looked at her for a second. Then he said, Cole's awake. Emily's knees went. She didn't fall, but she felt them go, and Reynolds saw it, and he did not reach out because he was Jack Reynolds, and he knew exactly what she needed, and it wasn't a hand. He woke up at 0200 at Landstuhl, Reynolds said. First thing he did was fight the tube. Second thing he did once they got it out, he asked a nurse a question. Emily could not speak. You want to know what the question was? Yes, Emily said. Reynolds pulled a piece of paper out of his cargo pocket. It was folded and it had been written on by somebody in a hurry, and he read it exactly the way it was written. He said, how many did she use? The pad went completely silent. That's it, Reynolds said. That's the first sentence out of the man's mouth. Not where am I, not am I going to keep the arm. He asked a nurse in Germany how many rounds Specialist Carter used, and that poor woman had no idea what he was talking about. So she wrote it down and gave it to the liaison, and the liaison gave it to my chief, and my chief called me at 0400. Emily was crying. She didn't care. Reynolds held the paper out to her. He knew you'd know, he said. Emily took it. 25, she whispered. Yeah. Reynolds nodded. That's what I told him. And Carter. He stopped. And for the first time since she'd met him, Lieutenant Jack Reynolds looked like he was having trouble. The chief said Cole laughed. On a ventilator 4 days out of 2 surgeries, they told him 25, and he laughed. Why, Bill? He didn't say, but Whitmore said it. From 20 feet away, quiet in the voice of a man who had spent 26 years teaching people and had finally been proven right about exactly one of them, because she had 55 left. Reynolds turned around. Whitmore was looking at Emily. He's a sniper, Whitmore said. He asked how many she used because that's the only question that tells you who somebody is. Nobody said anything. Then Tanner, 23 years old from Ohio, with absolutely no sense of occasion whatsoever, said, Sir, permission to say something stupid. Reynolds sighed. Go ahead, Tanner. Tanner looked at Emily. Carter, I've been trying to explain you to people for 5 days, he said, and I keep getting it wrong. I keep telling him about the 800-meter shot because it's the cool part, but that's not the part. Emily wiped her eyes. What's the part, Tanner? You took 11 seconds, Tanner said. Emily went still. Before the first one, I was 20 feet away, flat on my back, and I watched you lie down and fix your elbow and take the stock out and put it back in, and I thought she's lost it, she's gone, she's about to die. Tanner's voice was doing something. And then I did the math after, and Carter, in those 11 seconds, those guys got about 30 meters closer to us. Tanner, you gave up 30 meters to do it right. Tanner shook his head. I've been in 4 years, ma'am, and I would have fired at second one, and I'd have missed, and we'd all be dead. Emily stood on that pad and could not find one single word. And then Reynolds said the thing that changed everything. Carter, I need you to hear this from me before you hear it from a piece of paper. Emily's stomach dropped. There's going to be an investigation, he said. Doyle's head snapped around. Sir, what? Sergeant, stand easy. Sir, with respect. Doyle. Reynolds' voice was iron. Stand easy. Then he looked back at Emily, and his face was the flattest she had ever seen it. An unqualified soldier operated a precision weapon system she was not certified on, Reynolds said, and she killed 9 people with it. There's no form for that, Carter. There's no box. Somebody at Brigade opened a 15-6 this morning because there is literally no other thing on earth for them to do. Emily's ears were ringing. Am I in trouble, sir? Reynolds looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. Yes, Reynolds said, and I'm going to tell you exactly why, because you deserve the real answer and not the comfortable one. Emily's hands had gone numb. You did nothing wrong, Reynolds said. Not one thing, I was there. You saved 11 men and you did it by the book. A book you weren't even issued. But Carter, the Army is not a moral institution. It's an administrative one. And administratively, you are a problem because if what you did is okay, then any specialist anywhere can pick up any weapon system at any time. And there are people at Brigade whose entire job is making sure that sentence never becomes true. So they're going to punish me for it. They're going to try to file you, Reynolds said. There's a difference, and the difference won't feel like anything. Doyle exploded. Sir, Sergeant, I have been in this for 12 deployments, Reynolds said without raising his voice. And I have never once seen the Army know what to do with something it doesn't have a form for. Emily said very quietly, what happens to me? I don't know. Sir, Carter, I don't know. Reynolds looked at her. It could be nothing. It could be a letter in your file. Somebody could decide to be creative, and it could be worse. I've seen a man get a Silver Star in an Article 15 out of the same afternoon. Whitmore spoke from 20 feet away. Who's the investigating officer? Reynolds turned. That's the part I flew 400 kilometers to say in person, he said. And Emily knew. Before he said it, she knew the way she knew a number was wrong on a page instantly in her stomach. Kessler, she said. Reynolds nodded once. Doyle said, you have got to be kidding me. He's the only officer at Ryder outside the chain of the element involved, Reynolds said. Brigade picked him off a list. They don't know who he is. They don't know anything about him. To them, he's a name and a rank and an availability. Whitmore said, Sir, that man has been riding this soldier for 4 months in front of witnesses. I know. Sir, he called her a clerk on the range in front of 40 people. Master Sergeant, I know, Reynolds said. I know all of it. Do you think I'd have gotten on a helicopter if I didn't? Emily was very still. Everybody was looking at her. And Emily Carter said the sentence that nobody on that pad expected. It's fine. Doyle turned on her. Carter, it's fine, Sergeant. It is not fine that man has spent 4 months. He apologized, Emily said. The pad went silent. Reynolds said slowly, say that again. Lieutenant Kessler came into my warehouse on day 1, Emily said. He apologized. He told me he shot a 6-inch group and blamed the wind, and he knew it was a lie when he said it. He told me he found the one person on this base who wouldn't fight back and made her his whole personality. Nobody moved. He said that? Whitmore asked. Word for word, Master Sergeant. Reynolds stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, Carter, that's the worst news I've heard all week. Emily blinked. Sir, because now he has something to prove, Reynolds said. And specialist in my experience, a man with a guilty conscience and a 15-6 is more dangerous than a man who hates you. A man who hates you is predictable. Brady Kessler opened the investigation at 0900 the next morning. He did it in a plywood room with a folding table and a laptop, and Emily sat down across from him with her ledger in front of her because she did not know how to sit down anywhere without it. Kessler looked at the ledger. You brought your book. Yes, sir. Carter, this is a formal proceeding. You're allowed counsel. You're allowed to say nothing at all. I know, sir. Do you want counsel? No, sir. Kessler rubbed his eyes. I'm going to ask you a question, he said. And I want you to understand that I'm asking it as the investigating officer and not as the guy who came into your warehouse last week. Yes, sir. Why didn't you request counsel? And Emily said, because I didn't do anything wrong, sir, and I've never in my life needed help explaining a number. Kessler put his pen down. Carter, he said quietly, that is exactly the kind of answer that gets people crucified. They went 11 hours the first day. He walked her through every minute of it. 0410, 0440, 0513. He made her account for every round, and she accounted for every round. And by hour 4, the man on the other side of that table had stopped writing and started just listening. At hour 6, he said, stop. Sir, you've told me you fired 25 rounds. Yes, sir. How many did you have? 80 were issued. Cole fired 11. I fired 25. 55 remained. Emily didn't look at the ledger once. 54 were recovered from the weapon and the remaining magazines when Petty Officer Tanner took possession at 0620. 1 round was expended in a function check I performed at Carter. At 0526 when I re-established on the alternate position, sir, because I had rolled with a weapon and I had to know it hadn't taken a rock. Carter. She stopped. Kessler was staring at her. You did a function check, he said. In the middle of that. Yes, sir. Under fire. Yes, sir. Why? And Emily said, because a weapon that's been dropped is a variable, sir, and I don't take shots with variables. Brady Kessler sat back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling of that plywood room for about 10 seconds. Then he said, Specialist, I've been doing this a week and I want you to know something. I've read the SEAL statements. All 11. I've read Reynolds. I've read Tanner. And they all say the same thing, which is that you were the calmest person on that mountain. Emily said nothing. They're wrong, Kessler said. Emily's head came up. You weren't calm, he said. You were terrified. You've been terrified this entire interview. Your hands haven't stopped since hour one. He pointed at her. You just don't let it into the numbers. Emily looked down at her hands. They were shaking. They had been shaking for 6 hours. How long have you been doing that? Kessler asked. Doing what, sir? Being afraid and useful at the same time. And Emily Carter said, since I was 9 years old, sir. Kessler closed the laptop at 2000. Go eat, he said. Sir Carter, that's an order. Go eat something. She stood up. Specialist. She stopped at the door. Kessler was still sitting there. When this is over, he said, whatever happens, I want you to know I'm not going to write this the way Brigade wants it written. Emily turned around. Sir, don't do that. Excuse me, don't do that for me. Her voice was steady. Sir, you've got a father who's a colonel and a career that's 40 years long, and you have exactly one thing to gain from this. And that's a clean report that says a specialist violated a regulation. If you write anything else, they're going to remember your name, and they're not going to remember it fondly. Kessler stared at her. Carter, are you talking me out of helping you? I'm telling you the cost, sir, Emily said. That's my job. Somebody asks me for a number, I give them the number. I don't decide what they do with it. She walked out, and Brady Kessler sat alone in a plywood room for a very long time. The report went to Brigade on day 9. Emily never read it. What she knew from Doyle, who knew from a clerk at the Brigade who owed him, because that is how information has always actually moved in the United States Army. Kessler's findings were 4 pages. The last paragraph was 1 sentence. Doyle came into the warehouse at 2200 with a piece of paper in his hand and his face doing something Emily had never seen it do. Carter. Sergeant. Sit down. I'm working. Carter, sit down. I'm not asking. She sat. Doyle read it out loud. He had to stop once in the middle. Specialist Carter was not certified on the weapon system in question. This is true. It is also in the finding of this officer the only thing about that morning that is worth writing down, and I declined to write it down as a deficiency. The deficiency is ours. 11 men were on that hillside, and only one of them had been trained to do what needed to be done, and when he fell, the United States Army's answer was to hope. Specialist Carter was not the failure of that plan. She was the correction. Emily did not move. Doyle folded the paper. That man just set himself on fire for you, he said. I told him not to. Yeah, well, Doyle sniffed hard. Turns out he's not as much of a coward as he spent 4 months proving. Emily put her hands over her face. Sergeant, what happens to him? You're asking what happens to him. Yes, Doyle laughed and it came out wet. Carter, you are the most frustrating human being I have ever served with, he said. You're about to find out if you're getting an Article 15 and you're asking about the guy who spent 4 months calling you a clerk. He wrote the truth, Emily said. Somebody should ask what it cost him. Nothing, said a voice from the doorway. They both turned. Brady Kessler was standing there. It cost me nothing, he said. Brigade returned the report. Emily stood up. Sir, they returned it. Kessler's face was strange, which in the Army is a very polite way of saying try again. They wanted me to remove the last paragraph. Doyle said, and Bob, and I said no. Nobody said anything. So they sent it up, Kessler said, which they had to, because there's no form for a lieutenant who won't rewrite a 15-6 either. He almost smiled. Turns out the whole institution runs on people finding a form. Take the form away and they get very quiet. Sir, Emily said, what happened? Kessler pulled a second piece of paper out of his pocket. A colonel read it, he said. Emily's stomach dropped. A full bird at brigade read my report at 1400 today, and he called me at 1510. Kessler said, and he asked me one question. What question? He asked me, Lieutenant, if I put this soldier in front of a sniper course, does she pass? The warehouse went absolutely silent. Emily could hear the generator outside. And what did you say, sir? She whispered. I said I don't know, Kessler said, because I don't. I've seen her shoot exactly once 4 months ago, and I lied about it. Emily's eyes filled. So he asked me who would know, Kessler said, and I gave him a name. She was in the operations center at 07 the next morning because Reynolds had called, and Reynolds did not call for nothing. The colonel's name was Alvarez. He was 58, and he had the eyes of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything in about 1994. He looked at her for a long time. Specialist Carter. Sir. Sit down. She sat. I've read 4 pages by a lieutenant who has, in my professional opinion, just ended his career, Alvarez said. I've read 11 statements from Naval Special Warfare, one of which is from a chief petty officer who dictated it from a hospital bed in Germany with one working arm. Emily's breath stopped. You want to know what Cole wrote? Yes, sir. Alvarez slid a page across the table. Emily looked at it. It was 6 words. She was the only one listening. Emily put her hand over her mouth. 6 words, Alvarez said. I've been in 34 years. That's the shortest statement I've ever received, and it's the loudest one. Emily couldn't speak. Now, Alvarez folded his hands. Here's where we are. I have a problem specialist, and the problem is not you. The problem is that 11 men lived because of a regulatory violation, and I am not going to be the officer who writes it down as a violation, and I am also not going to be the officer who tells the entire Army that untrained soldiers should pick up precision weapons. Yes, sir. So there's exactly one way out of this box, Alvarez said, and it's the ugliest, most bureaucratic, most beautiful thing I've ever thought of. Emily waited. I'm going to make it true retroactively, he said. Sir, if you graduate a sniper course specialist, then the Army's position is not that a clerk picked up a rifle. The Army's position is that a soldier with demonstrated aptitude performed within her capabilities and was subsequently qualified. Alvarez's mouth moved slightly. Nobody violated anything. We just did the paperwork out of order. Doyle, standing at the back, said, Sir, that's the biggest load of... Sergeant, Alvarez said without turning around. If you finish that sentence, I will have to hear it, and if I hear it, I will have to do something about it, and I would rather not, because I agree with you. Doyle shut up. Alvarez looked at Emily. And if I fail, sir, she said, then we're back in the box. What happens to Lieutenant Kessler if I fail? Alvarez's eyebrows went up. That is a hell of a question, he said. Sir, I'd like an answer. Alvarez studied her. If you fail, he said. Then a lieutenant wrote an insubordinate report defending a soldier who couldn't back it up. And yes, specialist, that becomes a very different document. Emily nodded slowly. In Whitmore, sir. Master Sergeant Whitmore, Alvarez said, conducted unauthorized individual training with a soldier outside her MOS on a range that was closed for 8 weeks without documentation. Doyle made a sound. If you graduate, Alvarez said, that becomes a talent identification program. If you don't, it's exactly what I just described. Emily Carter sat in that chair and understood with perfect clarity that 3 men's careers were now sitting on a berm somewhere waiting for her to shoot, which was, when she thought about it later, the single most familiar feeling of her entire life. Everybody's needs in her hands, nobody's name on it. Sir, she said, when do I leave? Alvarez almost smiled. You haven't asked me if you want to, he said. And Emily said, sir, that's not one of the numbers. She almost quit in week 4. That's what she told people. It's not what happened. What happened was that she did quit out loud at 11 o'clock at night, sitting on the floor of a barracks with her feet wrecked and her hands wrecked and a stress fracture in her left tibia. She hadn't reported because reporting it was the same as going home. She said the words, I'm done. There was nobody in the room. That was the point. She was alone and she said it and nobody heard it, and that meant it hadn't happened yet. She had 11 minutes to take it back. She sat there for 9 of them and thought about a man in a garage in Colorado who had lost a leg on a Tuesday for no reason at all and who had gotten up every single morning for 15 years afterward to fix other people's trucks, and who had never once told anybody it was hard. And she thought about Whitmore saying the only failure is stopping before you're finished. And then, because she was Emily Carter, she thought about the actual numbers. 26 weeks. She was in week 4. 22 to go. That's it. That's what turned that. Not courage, not her father, not Whitmore. A specialist looked at a problem and reduced it to a quantity, because a quantity is a thing you can count. And Emily Carter had never once in her life been beaten by something she could count. She got up. She taped her leg. She went to formation. She did not report the fracture for 11 weeks. The letter from Cole arrived in week 14. It was handwritten, and the handwriting was terrible because he was writing with the wrong hand. It said one thing in 8 seconds, every time. Don't let them speed you up. They will try. Say no. Emily read it 400 times. She got smoked for it twice by an instructor who told her she was the slowest shooter in the course and asked her if she thought the enemy was going to wait for her. And Emily Carter, who had spent 25 years folding up small, stood at parade rest and said, "Sergeant, I've been shot at." The range went quiet. "He didn't wait," she said. "He didn't wait, and I took 11 seconds anyway, and he's dead and I'm not." She should have been destroyed for that. She wasn't. The instructor looked at her for a long moment, and then he said in front of everybody, "Carry on, specialist," and walked away. That night, Tanner told the story to somebody who told somebody, and by week 16 it had crossed an ocean, and by week 17 it had reached a berm at OB Ryder, where a 51-year-old man with a bad knee was teaching cooks to shoot. Whitmore didn't say anything when he heard it. Doyle, who was standing right there, said he just closed his eyes for a second. She graduated on a Thursday. 22 out of 41 started. 9 finished. Emily Carter finished 4th. She would tell you that. Every time. Not first, 4th. She was never the best shooter in that course, and she never pretended to be. And the 3 ahead of her were faster and more talented and could do things with a rifle she couldn't do on her best day. But there is a column on the final evaluation, and it is not a scoring column, and most people never look at it. It's called shot discipline. It measures the shots you didn't take. Emily Carter is the only student in the history of that course to finish with a perfect score in that column. 0. 0 unnecessary shots in 26 weeks. The instructor who wrote her final evaluation then added a note at the bottom that was not required and that nobody asked for. It said, "I have nothing to teach this soldier about the trigger. She came here knowing the only part that matters." There were 4 people at her graduation. Her father flew from Colorado on a ticket he could not afford on a leg that hurt him the entire way. And he stood in the back with his hands folded, and he did not say one word during the whole ceremony. Sergeant Marcus Doyle took leave to be there. Actual leave. Doyle had not taken leave in 6 years. Brady Kessler came in civilian clothes because by then he was a civilian. He never made captain. He didn't ask her to feel bad about it. And when she tried, he said, "Carter, I got to do exactly one thing in the Army that I'm proud of. That's one more than most people. Don't you dare apologize for it." And Ryan Cole came. He came with a cane and an arm that would never work right again, and a navy blazer that did not fit him anymore. And when Emily walked off that stage, he did not salute her, and he did not hug her. He held out his good hand. "How many?" he said. Emily laughed, and it broke in the middle. 25, Chief. You had 55 left." "I know." "You could have had more." "I know." And Ryan Cole gripped her hand and said, "That's why I asked." Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore was not there. He sent nothing. No letter, no call, no message. Emily understood. It wasn't his story. Emily Carter served 11 more years. She deployed 4 times. She never once talked about the Valley. When people brought it up, and they always brought it up, she changed the subject with a skill that eventually became legendary. She taught at the end. She was good at it in a way that surprised everybody except one man. She had a rule, and every student who ever came through her course heard it on day 1, and every one of them thought it was a joke until about week 9. The rule was, I don't care what you hit, I care what you didn't. Her father died in the spring of her 9th year, in the garage, working on somebody else's truck. 81 years old, the neighbor found him and said he'd been humming. Emily flew home and cleaned out that garage herself and would not let anybody help. And in a coffee can on the shelf above his bench, she found a folded piece of paper. It was a target, 5 rounds, 100 meters, 1 ragged hole. In the corner, in Whitmore's blocky handwriting, a date and 4 words. She just did it. And underneath, in her father's handwriting in pencil, in the hand of a man who had never written a single thing down in his entire life, I knew. Emily Carter sat on the floor of that garage for 2 hours. Master Sergeant Daniel Whitmore died at 74 in a VA hospital in Colorado Springs, and Emily was in the room and she was holding his hand, and it was the only time in 23 years they ever touched. He was mostly gone by then. But near the end, he opened his eyes and looked at her, and he was completely there for about 11 seconds, and he said, "Carter, Master Sergeant, did you ever get greedy again?" And Emily Carter said, "No." Whitmore closed his eyes. And Daniel Whitmore, who had spent 12 years carrying 2 men off a hillside in Kunar every single morning of his life, finally set them down. She retired as Sergeant First Class. There was a ceremony. She hated it. Reynolds came, and he was a captain by then and looked exactly the same, and he stood up and said 8 words and sat back down, which is the most Jack Reynolds thing that has ever happened. He said, "There were 11 of us. There still are." Young soldiers used to ask her about it. They always wanted the shot. They wanted 840 meters and the man who stood up. And Emily Carter always gave them the same answer, and it drove them crazy because it wasn't the answer they came for. "I wasn't born a sniper," she'd say. "I was a soldier who was ready when somebody needed me. That's the whole thing. There's nothing else in it." And then she'd add the part they never wrote down, the part that was actually true, the part she'd learned in 11 seconds on a rock with a dead man's rifle and another man's blood on her elbows. The person carrying the ammunition is not waiting for their turn. They're already doing the job. And on the day the rifle finally reaches their hands, they don't become someone else. They just keep doing it. She never once called herself a hero. She called herself what she had always been, from a warehouse in Afghanistan to a mountain at 11,000 feet to a garage in Colorado with a piece of paper and a coffee can. She was the one who counted, and because she counted, 11 men came home.